We don't
Here's
serve
your
your
meal,
kind
sir.
here. Take your broke ass
Don't worry
back
about the
to whatever
fries, they're
hole
on the
you
house
crawled out
today.
of. Victor Kane's words
I
cut
hope
through the
things
crowded
look up
restaurant
soon.
like a blade. He stood with his arm crossed, blocking the entrance, looking down at the man in the faded construction jacket with open disgust. The man didn't move, didn't flinch, didn't raise his voice. He just stood there, shoulders slightly hunched, eyes tired, waiting for permission to exist in a space he actually owned. What Victor Kane didn't know, but what nobody in that packed Friday night restaurant knew, was that the man he had just humiliated owned every table, every chair, every light fixture, and every single paycheck in that building, including Victor's. And what happened next when a black waitress named Grace Williams walked over and responded to this stranger's simple request for the cheapest thing on the menu would leave him completely speechless, frozen, unable to form a single word, because her act of kindness was about to expose a secret that had been bleeding them all dry for 18 months. Before we begin this story, if you enjoy stories about justice, dignity, and the power of treating people right, subscribe to our channel and follow this story all the way to the end, and drop a comment telling us what city you're watching from. We love seeing how far these stories travel around the world. Now, let's begin. The email arrived at 9:47 p.m. on a Tuesday night. Marcus Jefferson was alone in his corner office on the 14th floor of the Hamilton Building in downtown Atlanta. The cleaning crew had come and gone hours ago. The security guard had waved goodnight at 8. Even the workaholics on the 10th floor had finally called it quits. But Marcus was still there, staring at his computer screen, reading the same 3 sentences over and over again. The sender was anonymous. No name, no return address, just a string of random numbers. The subject line was simple: check the tip pool. Marcus clicked it open for the 5th time. They're stealing from us. The black girls get it worst. Look at the numbers. 3 attachments, 3 photographs, 3 pieces of evidence that were about to change everything. The first photo showed a schedule board with handwritten changes. Names crossed out, shifted around, moved from prime shifts to dead ones. Grace Williams, a Friday night to Monday lunch. Denise Harper Saturday dinner to Tuesday breakfast. Tanya Morrison Sunday brunch to Wednesday morning. All black women. All losing their best shifts. All being pushed to the margins. The second photo was a screenshot of bank deposits. Small amounts always under $1,000 deposited into an account Marcus didn't recognize. $835 on October 31st. $890 on November 3rd. $912 on November 5th. $1,235 on November 7th. The third photo made his blood run cold. A receipt from the Magnolia Room, his flagship restaurant, his father's legacy. The credit card tip line showed $45, but handwritten below it in different ink someone had scrawled pool total $12. $45 reduced to $12. $33 stolen. From one receipt, one table, one night. How many receipts were there? How many tables? How many nights? Marcus pushed back from his desk and walked to the window. Atlanta sprawled below him, a glittering grid of lights and highways and possibility. 3 years ago, he had stood at this same window with his father, pointing out the locations of their restaurants, dreaming about expansion, talking about legacy. His father had put his hand on Marcus's shoulder and said something Marcus would never forget. "Son, you can build an empire or you can build a family. The smart man figures out how to do both." Marcus had tried. God knows he had tried. After his father's heart attack, after the funeral, after the lawyers and the paperwork and the grief that felt like drowning. Marcus had thrown himself into the business. 5 restaurants now, 92 employees, revenue up 40% in 3 years. But somewhere along the way, he had stopped seeing the people. He had started seeing numbers instead. Profit margins, customer ratings, quarterly projections. He had built an empire. But had he protected his family, Marcus walked back to his desk and opened the HR folder for the Magnolia Room. His fingers were trembling slightly as he scrolled through the records. 18 employees had quit in the past 6 months. 18 people who had walked away from steady jobs in a tough economy. The turnover rate had jumped over 300%. He clicked through the exit interview notes looking for patterns, scheduling conflicts, personal reasons, found another opportunity, the same vague phrases over and over again. But then he found the ones that mattered. Tanya Morrison hired March 2023, terminated August 2024. Exit interview notes, employee mentioned concerns about management practices. Declined to elaborate. Noted she was visibly upset. Denise Harper hired January 2024, still employed, but hours reduced from 35 to 12 per week. No exit interview conducted. Grace Williams hired November 2022, still employed. Hours reduced from 40 to 28 per week over past 6 months. No disciplinary actions on file. Performance reviews. Excellent, excellent, excellent. Marcus read that last line 3 times. Excellent performance reviews. Reduced hours. No explanation. Something was very wrong. He picked up his phone and called James Chen, his IT director. It rang 4 times. Before James answered, his voice groggy with sleep. Mr. Jefferson, it's almost 11. Is everything okay? I need security footage from the Magnolia room. Back office camera. Last 8 weeks. Everything you can pull. There was a pause. That's a lot of footage, sir. Is there something specific I should be looking for? Just pull it all. Encrypt it. Send it only to me and James. Yes, sir, don't tell anyone. Not HR, not operations, not anyone. The silence on the other end of the line stretched for 3 seconds. 4, 5. Understood, James finally said. I'll have it by Thursday morning. Marcus hung up and stared at his father's photograph on the desk. Big Daddy, everyone had called him. Not because he was physically large, though he was, because he had a large heart, a large presence, a large capacity for love. His father had started with nothing. Born in rural Georgia in 1952, raised by a single mother who cleaned houses for white families, Marcus Sr. had worked his way through trade school, then culinary school, then 20 years of kitchens, where he was always the only black face in the room. When he finally saved enough to open his own place, a small soul food restaurant on Auburn Avenue called Big Daddy's Kitchen, he had one rule that he never broke. Every person who walks through that door gets treated like family. I don't care if they're wearing a 3-piece suit or 3-day-old clothes. They get the same respect, the same food, the same love. Marcus had grown up in that kitchen, had learned to cook in that kitchen, had learned to treat people right in that kitchen, and now someone in his organization was treating people like they were worthless. Marcus opened a new note on his phone and typed 3 words. Thursday. Undercover. Justice. He needed to see it for himself. Not through reports or interviews or security footage. He needed to sit in that restaurant as a nobody and watch what happened when the owner wasn't looking. His father's voice echoed in his memory. You learn who people really are when they think you're nobody, son. That's when the masks come off. Thursday morning, Marcus stood in his bedroom closet staring at a jacket he hadn't touched in 3 years. The Carhartt work coat hung in the back corner behind the Italian suits and Egyptian cotton shirts. Faded brown canvas paint stains on the sleeves, a small tear near the left pocket where his father had caught it on a nail while building shelves for the original restaurant. Marcus had kept it after the funeral, couldn't bring himself to throw it away, couldn't bring himself to wear it either, until now. He pulled it off the hanger and held it up to the light. The fabric smelled faintly of sawdust and Old Spice, his father's scent preserved somehow through all these years. Marcus put on the jacket. The zipper stuck halfway up just like it always had. The sleeves were slightly too short, just like they had been on his father's long arms. He looked at himself in the mirror and felt his breath catch in his throat. For a moment, just a moment, he saw his father looking back at him. You got this, son, the reflection seemed to say. Go find out who's hurting our people. Then make it right. Marcus nodded at the mirror. Then he finished getting dressed. Worn jeans from the back of his drawer. Work boots he used for yard work soles separating at the toe. A faded Atlanta Braves cap pulled low over his eyes. He left his wallet at home. Just $60 in cash, small bills tucked into his front pocket. Left his Rolex on the dresser. Left his wedding ring, though Sandra had been gone 6 years now, taken by the same cancer that seemed to take all the good ones too soon. Left everything that made him Marcus Jefferson, owner of 5 restaurants and a 14-story office building. Became nobody. At 6 o'clock, Marcus drove his old pickup truck, the one he kept for hauling supplies, to a parking spot 2 blocks from the Magnolia room. He walked the rest of the way, feeling the November chill through the thin jacket, feeling the curious stares of people on the sidewalk. A white woman in yoga clothes crossed to the other side of the street when she saw him coming. A man in a business suit stepped around him without making eye contact. Marcus had almost forgotten what this felt like. The invisibility. The way people looked through you instead of at you. The subtle message delivered 1,000 times a day in 1,000 small ways that you didn't belong. His father had never forgotten. Had carried that weight every day of his life. Had built a business and raised a family and loved his community, all while carrying that weight. Marcus felt something twist in his chest. Pride. Grief. Determination. He reached the Magnolia room and paused outside the entrance. Through the window, he could see the Friday night crowd. Buckhead's finest. Lawyers and bankers and tech executives all dressed in clothes that cost more than some people made in a month. His restaurant. His staff. His father's legacy. And somewhere inside, someone was stealing from the people who made it all run. Marcus took a breath, pulled his shoulders down into a tired slump, and pushed through the door. The hostess was a young white woman named Angela. Marcus remembered her from the HR files. 22 years old, hired 3 months ago, related to someone on the board of directors. Her smile was professional and automatic when she first looked up. Then she saw the jacket, the boots, the cap, and the smile flickered just for a second before she recovered. "Hi there. Just you tonight?" "Just me." "Great. Let me find you a spot." She scanned the room and Marcus watched her eyes skip past the window. Tables, past the comfortable booths, past the prime real estate where the big spenders sat. Her gaze landed on a tiny two-top near the kitchen entrance, the worst seat in the house, loud cramped right in the path of servers rushing back and forth with heavy trays. "We have a table right over here," she said, already walking. Marcus followed without comment. This was the test. This was what he needed to see. Angela seated him, reared him with mechanical efficiency, dropped a menu on the table, and disappeared without offering water or explaining the specials. Marcus watched her return to the hostess stand and immediately greet the next customer, a white man in an expensive suit with warmth that hadn't been present 30 seconds ago. "Right this way, Mr. Harrison. Your usual table is ready. Can I get you started with your regular bourbon?" Marcus made a mental note. Angela. Preferential treatment. Different service for different customers. He opened the menu and felt his stomach tighten. The prices were high, as he knew they would be. $28 for the jambalaya, $34 for the ribeye, $22 for a Caesar salad. Even the appetizers started at $14. A server approached. Young black woman, natural hair, pulled back, tired eyes. That reminded Marcus of his mother after a long day of cleaning houses. Her name tag said Denise. "Hi there," she said, her voice professional but flat. "What can I get you to drink?" "Just water," Marcus said. "I'm still looking at the menu." Denise nodded and walked away without another word. No smile, no warmth, no connection. Marcus understood. She was exhausted, overwhelmed, running on empty. He could see it in the way she moved, the slight drag in her step, the mechanical quality of her interactions. He scanned the room, counting tables. Denise was handling 7 of them by herself. Another server, a young white woman, had only 3, and she was moving at half speed, chatting with customers, taking her time. The distribution wasn't random. It was deliberate. Then Marcus saw him. Victor Kane. The floor manager stood near the bar, clipboard in hand, surveying his domain like a king overlooking his kingdom. Tall, handsome, confident. The kind of man who took up space without apology. He was talking to a customer, a white man in a suit, laughing at something the man said, touching his shoulder in that familiar way that successful salespeople learn. Completely at ease. Completely in control. Then Victor's eyes swept across the room and landed on Marcus. The change was immediate. The warmth disappeared. The smile flattened. Victor's gaze moved over the faded jacket, the worn boots, the black face under the cap, and something shifted in his expression. Disgust? Dismissal. The look of a man who had already decided that Marcus was worth nothing. Victor said something to the customer, then walked toward Marcus's table. His footsteps were purposeful. His body language radiated authority. "Evening," he said. No smile, no warmth. His arms were crossed over his chest. "Evening," Marcus replied quietly. "Is there a problem with your table?" "No problem. Just waiting to order." Victor's eyes flicked to the single water glass, to the open menu, to the worn jacket and dusty boots. "We have a minimum spend policy during peak hours," he said. $20 per person. "Just so you're aware." "That's not company policy," Marcus said, keeping his voice even. Victor's expression hardened. "Excuse me, I said that's not company policy. There's no minimum spend requirement at any of our locations." The word hour slipped out before Marcus could stop it. But Victor didn't catch it. He was too focused on asserting dominance. "I make the policies on this floor," Victor said, his voice dropping lower. "And I'm telling you, if you can't afford to be here, maybe you should find somewhere more appropriate." The implication hung in the air between them. More appropriate for someone like you. More appropriate for someone black and poor and invisible. Marcus felt his jaw tighten. 30 years of business experience. 45 years of being a black man in America. Every instinct screaming at him to stand up, to reveal himself, to destroy this arrogant fool right here and now. But he needed to see more. He needed to document everything. He needed to understand exactly how deep this rot went. "I'll keep that in mind," Marcus said quietly. Victor stared at him for a long moment, then turned and walked away without another word. Marcus watched him go, memorizing the way he moved, the way he treated people, the way he wielded his small amount of power like a weapon. You don't own anything, Marcus thought. And very soon, you won't even own your job. 20 minutes passed. Denise brought his water, set it down without making eye contact, and rushed away to another table. Marcus sipped slowly and watched the room. Victor was back at the bar, flirting with a white woman in a red dress. He touched her arm, leaned in close, she laughed at her jokes. Meanwhile, his servers were drowning. Denise had picked up another table. A busboy dropped a tray of glasses, and Victor didn't even look up. And then Marcus saw her. Grace Williams. He knew her name from the HR files, from the email attachments, from the schedule that showed her shifts being cut week after week despite excellent performance reviews. She was moving through the crowded room with quiet confidence, weaving between tables like water flowing around rocks. Medium height, natural hair, warm brown skin. She smiled at customers as she passed genuine smiles that reached her eyes. She stopped at a table where an elderly black couple sat. Marcus couldn't hear the conversation, but he watched Grace lean down, touch the woman's shoulder, gently laugh at something the man said. The couple's faces transformed. They had been tense, uncertain, clearly uncomfortable in this expensive restaurant. But Grace made them relax, made them feel welcome, made them feel like they belonged. That was real, that was authentic, that was the kind of service you couldn't train. Grace walked past Marcus's table, glanced at him briefly, and kept moving. But something in her expression caught his attention. Recognition. Not of who he was, but of what he was experiencing. The isolation of being seen as less than. Denise returned to take his order. "Have you decided?" Marcus looked at the menu one more time. He had $60 in his pocket, enough for almost anything on the menu if he wanted. But that wasn't the test. "What's the cheapest thing you have?" Denise's expression didn't change, but her eyes flickered. Understanding. Judgment. Pity. All passing across her face in a fraction of a second. "The cornbread basket is $6. "Just that, then." "And the water's fine." Denise wrote it down and walked away. Marcus saw her approach Victor near the bar, saw them exchange words, saw Victor glance in his direction with that same expression of disgust. Then Victor was walking toward him again. "Changed your mind about staying?" Victor asked. His voice was louder now, loud enough for nearby tables to hear. "I ordered," Marcus said calmly, "cornbread. $6. Victor's lip curled. "You're taking up a table during our busiest shift for $6. I'm a paying customer. You're a waste of space." The words hung in the air. A woman at the next table glanced over, then quickly looked away. A man across the room pretended not to notice. Nobody said anything. Nobody intervened. Nobody stood up for the tired man in the worn jacket. "We need this table for actual customers," Victor continued. "So finish your cornbread and get out." "Understood." Marcus met his eyes, held them, let the silence stretch. "Understood," he finally said. Victor nodded once, satisfied with his dominance, and walked away. Marcus sat very still. His hands were trembling under the table, not from fear, from rage. This man, this employee, this person he had trusted to manage his restaurant, to protect his staff, to uphold his father's legacy. This man was a predator, and Marcus was going to destroy him. But not yet. Not until he had seen everything. 15 minutes later, the cornbread arrived. Denise set it down without comment and hurried away. Marcus stared at the basket. 4 small pieces of bread dry, probably yesterday's batch. He picked up a piece and took a bite. Stale. Flavorless. Nothing like the cornbread his father used to make golden and sweet and warm from the oven. He was about to put it down when someone appeared at his table. "Hey there, mind if I check on you?" "Check on you?" Marcus looked up. Grace Williams stood beside him, a water pitcher in her hand. Her eyes were warm, curious kind. "I'm fine," he said. "Just eating." Grace glanced at the cornbread, at his water glass, at the worn jacket and tired eyes. She didn't look away. Didn't pretend not to see. Just saw him fully and completely as a human being. "Long day?" she asked. The question was simple. The kindness behind it was not. "Long week," Marcus admitted. The words came out before he could stop them. "Long month, actually." Grace nodded slowly. She refilled his water without being asked, adding a fresh lemon wedge. "I know how that feels," she said. "Some weeks just take everything out of you." "Yeah." Marcus looked at her, really looked. Something in her face reminded him of his mother. The same quiet strength, the same determination, the same warmth that survived even the hardest days. They really do. Grace was quiet for a moment. Then she leaned in, slightly lowering her voice. "Can I be honest with you?" Marcus raised his eyebrows. "Okay. Our kitchen made too much jambalaya tonight. New line cook still learning portions. He made a whole extra batch that's going to get thrown out in about 20 minutes unless someone eats it." Marcus felt his throat tighten. He knew what she was doing. The lie was obvious, generous kind. There was no extra jambalaya, no new cook, no kitchen waste. She was offering him dignity wrapped in a story he could accept. "I can't pay for that," he said quietly. "No charge." Grace's voice was gentle but firm. "It's already made, already paid for. My manager hates food waste. It's one of the few things he's actually right about." She smiled slightly at that, a private joke, a small act of rebellion against the man who had just humiliated Marcus in front of the entire restaurant. "It's either going to you or it's going in the trash," she continued. "And between you and me, you look like you've been working hard. A man who works hard deserves more than cornbread." Marcus stared at her. His mouth opened. No words came out. His throat had closed completely. His eyes were stinging. His hands were trembling. This woman, this waitress, this person who was being robbed of her tips, having her hours cut, being mistreated and undervalued by his own employee. This woman was standing here offering a complete stranger a $28 meal because she thought he needed it. Not because she would get anything in return. Not because anyone was watching. Not because it was her job. Because it was right. Marcus tried to speak. His voice cracked. "Why would you do that?" Grace tilted her head slightly as if the question confused her. "Because everyone who walks through that door deserves to be treated like they matter," she said simply. "Rich, poor, dressed up, dressed down. Everyone." She pulled out her notepad. "So, can I bring you that jambalaya? It's really good, I promise. House-made with andouille sausage, shrimp chicken. Comes with rice and fresh cornbread, not that stuff." She nodded at the stale bread in his basket. Marcus couldn't speak. He could only nod. Grace's smile widened warm and real. "Perfect. I'll be right back. And don't worry, if anyone gives you trouble about it, you tell them Grace said it was kitchen waste and they can talk to me." She turned to go. "Wait," Marcus managed. His voice was rough. "What's your name again? Your full name, Grace Williams. Thank you, Grace." He meant it with every fiber of his being. "Really? Thank you. You're welcome," she said. And then softer, "You matter. Don't forget that." She walked away toward the kitchen. Marcus watched her go, this woman who made probably $12 an hour, plus whatever tips Victor didn't steal from her. This woman who was probably counting every penny, worrying about rent, worrying about bills, worrying about all the things Marcus hadn't had to worry about in decades. And she had just given away $28 because she thought a stranger needed kindness. Marcus looked down at his hands. They were shaking. His vision was blurry. He hadn't cried since his father's funeral, hadn't let himself feel anything that deeply in 3 years. But sitting in that restaurant wearing his father's jacket, being treated like nobody, and then being seen, really seen, by a woman who had every reason to be bitter and hard and closed off. Something broke open inside him. He wiped his eyes quickly, hoping no one noticed. Victor Kane noticed. The floor manager had been watching from his position near the bar. He had seen Grace talking to the man in the worn jacket, seen her writing on her notepad, seen her heading toward the kitchen with what looked like a full order. He waited until she reached the POS station, then walked over. His footsteps were hard on the wooden floor. His expression was cold. "What did you just do?" Grace didn't look up from the screen. Her fingers moved quickly inputting the order. "Kitchen waste, extra jambalaya from the new prep cook." Victor stepped closer, invading her space. "I know what you did, Grace. That's a $28 plate. It was going to be thrown out. Company policy allows for reasonable comps to avoid food waste." "I don't care what company policy says." Victor's voice dropped lower, uglier. "We don't give charity to people who can't pay. This isn't a shelter." Grace finally looked at him. Her expression was calm, controlled. But Marcus could see the tension in her shoulders, the careful calculation in her eyes. "He's a customer," she said. "He deserves the same respect as anyone else. He's a waste of space taking up a table I need for people who actually spend money." Victor crossed his arms. "That meal is coming out of your tips. $28. Grace's face didn't change, but Marcus saw something flicker in her eyes. Pain. Exhaustion. The tired recognition of someone who had been through this exact scenario many times before. "Fine," she said quietly. "Fine. That's all you have to say. What would you like me to say, Victor?" Victor leaned closer. His voice was almost a whisper now, but Marcus could still hear it. "I'd like you to remember who runs this floor. I'd like you to remember that your hours depend on me. I'd like you to remember that you're replaceable, Grace. Very, very replaceable." Grace held his gaze. Didn't flinch. Didn't back down. "I'll remember," she said. "Good." Victor smiled, thin and cruel. "And you're cut at 9 instead of 11. I don't need servers who waste company resources on people who don't belong here." He said those last 3 words with particular emphasis. People who don't belong here. The implication was clear. Grace said nothing. She submitted the order on the screen, turned, and walked toward the kitchen. Victor called after her loud enough for the nearby staff to hear. "Bleeding heart's gonna bleed you dry, Williams. Keep it up and you'll be looking for a new job." She didn't turn around, didn't respond, just kept walking, her back straight, her dignity intact. Marcus had heard every word. The emotion from a few minutes ago transformed into something else. Something harder, something colder, something that felt like justice. She wasn't just being kind. She was paying for his meal out of tips she desperately needed, tips that were already being stolen from her, and she was being punished for it, losing $28, losing 2 hours of work, being cut early on the busiest night of the week, and she had said fine, fine, like she was used to it, like this happened every week, like she had accepted that this was simply how her life worked. Marcus thought about the email, about the black women's names crossed off the schedule, about the 18 employees who had quit in 6 months, about the bank deposits that didn't match the tip pools. He thought about his father, who had faced this kind of treatment every day of his working life and had responded by building something beautiful, something dignified, something that treated everyone like family. And he thought about Victor Kane, who had taken that legacy and poisoned it. Not for much longer, Marcus promised silently. Not for much longer. 12 minutes later, Grace returned with a tray. She set it down in front of Marcus, and he stared at what she had brought. The jambalaya was perfect. Andouille sausage, shrimp chicken, all swimming in a rich red sauce over fluffy white rice. Steam rose from the bowl, carrying the scent of cayenne and thyme and home. Beside it sat a basket of fresh cornbread, golden brown and glistening with butter. A tall glass of sweet tea with 2 lemon wedges. A small bowl of collard greens he hadn't ordered, and tucked next to the plate a generous slice of pecan pie with fresh whipped cream. The dessert wasn't... Marcus started. "I know," Grace smiled. "But you said it's been a long week. Sugar helps. Trust me." She refilled his water and adjusted the silverware, taking care with the presentation, treating him like a guest at a fine restaurant instead of a charity case. "Enjoy. Let me know if you need anything else." "Grace." She paused. "I heard what he said. About your tips, about your hours." Marcus's voice was rough. "You're paying for this meal, out of your own pocket." Grace was quiet for a moment. Her smile faded, replaced by something more complicated. Weariness. Defiance? Hope. "I've been working since I was 14 years old," she said softly. "Raised 3 siblings after my mama passed. Put myself through community college. Worked 2 jobs for 6 years to save enough to give my son a better life." She paused. "I know what it feels like to be hungry, to be tired, to wonder if anyone in the whole world sees you as a real person." Her eyes met his. "So yeah, I'm paying for your meal. And I'd do it again tomorrow. Because the day I stop helping people who need it is the day I become someone I don't recognize." Marcus couldn't speak. His throat was closed. His eyes were burning again. "You matter," Grace said again, simple and direct. "Everyone who sits at this table matters. Don't let anyone, especially someone like him," she glanced toward Victor, "tell you different." "Okay," Marcus nodded. It was all he could manage. "Okay then." Grace's smile returned, warm and genuine. "Enjoy that food. The cornbread especially. I watched Chef make it fresh this morning. It's the best batch he's made all month." She walked away to help another table. Marcus looked down at the food. His father's voice echoed in his memory. "The measure of a person is how they treat people who can't do anything for them, son. Remember that always." Grace Williams had just measured up higher than anyone Marcus had met in years. He picked up his fork, blinked back the moisture in his eyes, and took a bite. The jambalaya was incredible. Perfectly seasoned, perfectly cooked, every flavor in harmony. His chef was talented. Marcus knew that had hired him personally, had tasted dozens of dishes during the interview process. But this meal tasted different. Better. Like love made edible. Like kindness you could swallow. Like the food his father used to make at Big Daddy's kitchen, back when every dish was prepared with care. Marcus ate slowly, savoring each bite, making the meal last. And he watched. He watched Grace help an elderly couple navigate the menu, patiently explaining each dish, recommending options that fit their dietary restrictions. He watched her intervene when a busboy nearly dropped a heavy tray, steadying it with practiced hands, whispering encouragement to the nervous teenager. He watched her handle a rude customer, a white man, who snapped his fingers at her like she was a servant. She didn't flinch. Didn't sass back. Just refilled his water with the same warm professionalism she showed everyone else. He watched her check on Denise, who was clearly struggling with too many tables. Watched her quietly take over 2 of Denise's orders, run food for her cover for her during a bathroom break. Grace Williams was running that floor. Not Victor. Grace. She was the one solving problems, managing crises, taking care of people, and Victor was taking the credit while stealing her money. At 8:47, Grace's phone buzzed. Marcus watched her check it, saw her face go pale, saw her hand fly to her mouth. She looked around quickly, then hurried toward the back hallway. Marcus caught a glimpse of her face as she passed. Fear, raw, naked fear. Something was wrong. Something beyond the job, beyond Victor, beyond anything happening in this restaurant. Marcus waited 3 minutes, then stood and walked toward the restrooms. The back hallway was empty except for Grace, who stood pressed against the wall, phone clutched to her chest, tears streaming down her face. She looked up when she heard him coming, wiped her eyes quickly, forced a smile. "Sorry, I'll be right back to check on you. Just needed a minute." "Is everything okay?" Marcus asked. Grace's smile wavered. She looked down at her phone, then back at him. "My son," she said quietly. "He has sickle cell disease. His teacher called. He had an episode at after-school care. They're taking him to children's health care." Marcus felt his heart constrict. "How old is he? 8? Grace's voice cracked. "His name is Isaiah. He's my whole world, and I can't even—" She stopped, took a breath, forced herself back under control. "I can't leave. If I walk out of this shift, Victor will fire me, and if I lose this job, I lose my health insurance. And if I lose my insurance—" She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't have to. Marcus understood. Without insurance, the medications and treatments for sickle cell disease could cost thousands of dollars a month. Grace wasn't trapped in this job because she loved it. She was trapped because her son's life depended on it, and Victor knew it. Victor was using it against her. "You should go," Marcus said. "Your son needs you." Grace shook her head. "I can't. I have to finish this shift. Victor already cut me 2 hours. I can't afford to lose the rest." She wiped her eyes again and straightened her shoulders. "Isaiah's grandmother is meeting him at the hospital. She'll call me if it's serious. I just have to make it 2 more hours." She looked at Marcus with something like shame. "I'm sorry. You didn't need to hear all that. I don't usually fall apart like this." "You're not falling apart," Marcus said. "You're being a mother. There's a difference." Grace stared at him. Something shifted in her expression. Surprise, gratitude, connection. "Thank you," she whispered, "for saying that." She took another breath, tucked her phone in her pocket, and walked back toward the floor. Back to work. Back to serving people who didn't know her name. Back to being invisible. Marcus watched her go. His hands were clenched at his side. His jaw was tight. An 8-year-old boy. Sickle cell disease. A mother who couldn't afford to be with him because she needed the job. A manager who exploited that desperation. This wasn't just wage theft anymore. This was something worse. This was cruelty. This was power being used to hurt people who couldn't fight back. Marcus returned to his table. The food was cold now, but he didn't care. He wasn't hungry anymore. He watched the rest of the shift with new eyes. At 900 exactly, Victor cut Grace just as he had promised. "Williams, you're done. Clock out." Grace didn't argue. She went to the POS station, processed her end-of-shift paperwork, and headed for the back office. Marcus positioned himself near the hallway where he could see through the window in the office door. The nightly tip pool ritual was about to begin. 4 servers gathered in the back office: Grace Denise, a white woman named Jennifer, and a young man named Tyler. They emptied their cash tips into a jar on the table. Victor stood at the front of the room, clipboard in hand. "Slow night," he announced. "Total pool is $780. Marcus did the math in his head. He had watched the floor all night. Every table had been full for 4 hours straight. Average spend was probably $60 per person. Tips on that would be at least 12% industry standard. $780 was less than half of what it should have been. Victor divided the money into envelopes and handed them out. Grace took hers without looking inside. Denise hesitated, opened hers, and frowned. "This seems low," Denise said. "We were slammed all night." Victor's expression didn't change. "Busy doesn't mean tips. Lots of cheap tables tonight. Be grateful for what you got." Denise looked like she wanted to argue. Grace touched her arm, a small gesture barely visible. "Stop. Don't. It's not worth it." Denise closed her mouth and put the envelope in her pocket. The servers filed out. Grace was last. She went to her locker, reached behind her extra uniform, and pulled out a worn manila envelope. Marcus watched her take out a scrap of paper, write something on it, and add it to the stack inside. She was documenting, keeping records, building a case, just like Marcus was. Grace tucked the envelope back into its hiding place, grabbed her coat and her purse, and left through the back door. Marcus waited 60 seconds, then followed. He found his truck 2 blocks away, got in, and sat in the darkness. The steering wheel was cold under his hands. The streetlight above him flickered and buzzed. Atlanta hummed around him, millions of people going about their lives unaware of what he had just witnessed. Marcus thought about Grace driving to the hospital right now praying her son was okay, calculating how many hours she would need to work to cover the medical bills. He thought about Denise, too tired and too scared to ask questions, accepting whatever scraps Victor threw at her. He thought about the 18 employees who had quit, the black women whose schedules kept getting cut, the cash that kept disappearing into Victor's pockets. And he thought about his father. Big Daddy had faced discrimination his entire life, had been denied jobs because of his skin color, had been cheated by suppliers who thought a black man wouldn't notice, had been underestimated, dismissed, ignored. But he had never become bitter. Never stopped believing in people. Never stopped treating everyone who walked through his door like family. What would Big Daddy do, Marcus asked himself. What would my father do if he were sitting in this truck right now? The answer came immediately, clear and certain. He would make it right, whatever it cost. Marcus pulled out his phone. He had 6 missed calls from Raymond, his business partner, 3 text messages demanding the quarterly projections, an email from the board chair asking if everything was okay. He ignored all of it. Instead, he opened his notes app and began to type. Monday meeting, all staff, 10 a.m., security footage review, financial audit, HR records, Grace Williams, Denise Harper, Tanya Morrison, every name, every dollar, every wrong, Victor Kane, termination with cause, criminal referral to DOL, and then at the bottom, make it right, whatever it costs, for Dad, for Grace, for all of them. He saved the note and stared at the screen. 2 days. He had 2 days to compile the evidence, prepare the confrontation, and figure out how to fix 18 months of damage. 2 days to honor his father's legacy. 2 days to show Grace Williams that someone in this world saw her, valued her, and was willing to fight for her. Marcus started the truck and drove toward home, but he didn't go straight there. Instead, he took a detour past Children's Healthcare of Atlanta. The hospital was lit up against the dark sky, windows glowing with the kind of fluorescent light that meant fear and hope and waiting. Somewhere in that building, an 8-year-old boy named Isaiah was fighting for his health, and his mother was probably beside him, now holding his hand, praying, calculating how she was going to pay for everything. Not for much longer, Marcus promised. Not for much longer. He drove home, sat down at his computer, and began to work. The security footage was waiting in his encrypted folder. 47 instances of Victor counting the tip jar with his back to the camera. 47 instances of bills disappearing into his jacket pocket. 47 instances of theft. Marcus watched every single one. At 3 a.m., his phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Thank you for being kind tonight. It meant more than you know. God bless. Grace. She must have gotten his number from the restaurant's sign-in sheet. Must have figured out which customer he was based on his table and his order. Marcus stared at the message for a long time. Then he typed back, "Your son is lucky to have you. I hope he feels better soon. You'll hear from me again, I promise." He hit send and went back to work. Monday was coming, and Victor Kane had no idea what was about to hit him. Grace Williams pulled into the parking lot of Children's Healthcare of Atlanta at 11:47 p.m. Her hands were still shaking from the drive. Her heart was still pounding from the moment she had seen Victor's face when she clocked out early, his eyes promising consequences she couldn't afford. But none of that mattered now. Isaiah. Her baby. Her whole world. She ran through the automatic doors and nearly collided with her mother at the reception desk. Mama Ruth grabbed her arms, steadied her, pulled her close. "He's okay, baby, he's okay. The doctor stabilized him. He's sleeping now." Grace felt her knees buckle. She would have fallen if her mother hadn't been holding her up. "What happened?" Her voice was barely a whisper. "They said he collapsed at after-school care. They said he couldn't breathe." "Pain crisis," Mama Ruth said. "A bad one. His oxygen dropped to 82 before the EMTs got there. But they gave him fluids, pain medication, oxygen therapy. He's stable now." Grace pressed her hand to her mouth, trying to hold back the sob that was building in her chest. "I should have been there. I should have been with him. You were working, Grace. You were doing what you had to do. I was serving jambalaya to strangers while my son was fighting for his life." Mama Ruth took her daughter's face in her hands. The same hands that had raised 4 children alone after Grace's father walked out. The same hands that had worked 3 jobs to keep the lights on. The same hands that had held Grace through every heartbreak and every triumph. "You listen to me," Ruth said firmly. "Isaiah is alive because you have health insurance. He's getting the best care in this city because you work 60 hours a week at that restaurant. You are not a bad mother. You are a warrior." Grace broke. The tears came fast and hard, 3 years of exhaustion and fear and loneliness pouring out in the fluorescent light of a hospital lobby. Mama Ruth held her through all of it. When the storm finally passed, Grace wiped her eyes and straightened her shoulders. "I need to see him. Room 412, 4th floor. The nurse said you can stay as long as you want." Grace walked to the elevator on legs that felt like water, Press the button for the 4th floor. Watch the numbers climb. When the doors opened, she saw a doctor waiting for her. Young black kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. His name tag said Dr. Marcus Thompson. Mrs. Williams? It's Ms. Grace's voice was automatic. I'm not married. Ms. Williams. I'm Dr. Thompson. I've been treating Isaiah tonight. Is he really okay? Dr. Thompson nodded. He's stable. The crisis was severe, but we caught it in time. However, he paused. That pause lasted an eternity. However, I'm concerned about the frequency of these episodes. This is his 3rd crisis in 4 months. His last hospitalization was only 6 weeks ago. Grace felt her stomach drop. What does that mean? It means we need to discuss treatment options. There's a new medication that's shown remarkable results in reducing crisis frequency. It could change Isaiah's quality of life significantly. Hope flickered in Grace's chest. What's it called? Hydroxyurea. It's been approved for pediatric use for several years now. With Isaiah's case history, he'd be an excellent candidate. Then let's do it. Let's start him on it. Dr. Thompson's expression shifted. Something uncomfortable entered his eyes. The medication requires close monitoring, monthly blood tests, regular specialist appointments, and the medication itself costs approximately $400 per month with standard insurance coverage. $400. Grace did the math in her head. That was more than her car payment, more than her grocery budget, more than she had left over after rent and utilities and the other bills that never seemed to stop coming. My insurance, she started. Dr. Thompson checked his tablet. Your current plan covers 60% of prescription costs, so you'd be looking at approximately $160 out of pocket each month plus copays for the monitoring appointments. $160. Every month. Forever. Grace thought about the envelope in her locker at work. The one labeled Isaiah's future. The one that held 52 pieces of paper documenting every dollar Victor had stolen from her. Thousands of dollars. Gone. Vanished into Victor's pocket while her son suffered. Can I see him now? Grace's voice was steady, but something had hardened inside her. Of course, room 412. He's been asking for you. Grace walked down the hallway, her footsteps echoing on the linoleum floor. She passed rooms full of sick children, rooms full of worried parents, rooms full of beeping machines and hushed conversations. She pushed open the door to 412. Isaiah was lying in the hospital bed looking so small against the white sheets. Tubes in his arm. Oxygen monitor on his finger. Dark skin, pale from exhaustion, eyes closed in fitful sleep. Grace pulled a chair to his bedside and took his hand. So small, so fragile, so precious. Hey, baby, she whispered. Mama's here. Mama's here now. Isaiah's eyes fluttered open. Brown eyes just like his father's. The father who had walked out when Isaiah was 2 years old the moment he learned about the sickle cell diagnosis. Couldn't handle a sick kid, he had said. Not what I signed up for. Grace had never forgiven him. Would never forgive him. Mama Isaiah's voice was weak hoarse from the breathing tube they had removed an hour ago. I'm here, baby. I'm right here. I was scared. It hurt so bad, Mama. Like fire inside my bones. Grace squeezed his hand, fighting back tears. I know, baby, I know, but the doctors fixed you up. You're going to be okay. Am I going to die? The question hit Grace like a physical blow. 8 years old. Her baby was 8 years old, and he was asking if he was going to die. No. Grace's voice was fierce. No, you are not going to die. You are going to grow up and go to college and become whatever you want to be. A doctor, a teacher, an astronaut, whatever you want. Isaiah managed a small smile. Can I be a chef like the man who makes the jambalaya at your restaurant? Grace laughed through her tears. You can be anything, baby. Anything at all. Isaiah's eyes were already closing again, the medication pulling him back toward sleep. Mama, yes, baby, that man tonight. The one you gave the free food to. Was he nice? Grace went still. How do you know about that? Grandma told me. She said you gave a poor man dinner because he was hungry. Grace thought about the stranger in the worn jacket. The tired eyes, the way he had looked at her like she was the first person who had really seen him in years. He was nice, she said softly. He was very nice. Good. Isaiah's voice was fading. That's what you always say, Mama. Be nice to people, even when it's hard. Even when it's hard, Grace agreed. Isaiah's breathing deep and into sleep took him. Grace sat in the chair beside his bed holding his hand, watching his chest rise and fall. $160 a month. Every month. For years. Maybe forever. Plus the money Victor had already stolen. Plus the hours he kept cutting. Plus the dignity he stripped away every single shift. Grace had been patient. She had been quiet. She had documented everything and waited for someone to notice, someone to care, someone to help. But sitting in that hospital room, watching her son sleep, something shifted inside her. She was done waiting. Saturday morning, Grace woke up in the hospital chair with a crick in her neck and a fire in her chest. Isaiah was still sleeping. The monitors showed steady vitals. A nurse had come in at 3 a.m. to check on him, had smiled at Grace, curled up in the chair, had whispered that he was doing well. Grace checked her phone. 7:23 a.m., 3 text messages. The first was from Mama Ruth. "How's my grandbaby? I'll be there at noon with food." The second was from Denise. "Girl Victor is on a rampage today. Be glad you're not here." The third was from a number she didn't recognize. "Your son is lucky to have you. I hope he feels better soon. You'll hear from me again. I promise." Grace stared at that last message for a long time. The stranger, the man in the worn jacket, the one she had given the jambalaya to. How had he gotten her number? Why had he texted her? What did he mean, "you'll hear from me again"? She saved the number, but didn't respond. Something about the message felt different. Not threatening, not creepy, just certain, like whoever sent it actually meant what they said. She put her phone away and looked at her son. "I'm going to fix this," she whispered. "I don't know how yet, but I'm going to fix this." At that exact moment, 16 miles away, Marcus Jefferson was standing in his home office surrounded by evidence. The security footage played on his main monitor. Victor counting the tip jar, pocketing cash over and over again. 47 separate instances. 47 crimes. The financial records covered his desk. Bank statements, POS reports, payroll data, credit card receipts. Every number told the same story. Victor Kane had stolen at least $38,000 from his employees over the past 18 months. Marcus had been up all night, but he wasn't tired. He was energized, focused, driven. His phone buzzed. Raymond again. "Marcus, where the hell are you? The board meeting was yesterday. I had to make excuses. Call me back immediately." Marcus ignored it. The board could wait. Raymond could wait. Everything could wait except this. He picked up his phone and made a call. "James, I need you to run a background check on Victor Kane. Everything you can find. Employment history, financial records, any civil or criminal matters, and I need it by tomorrow morning. That's a big ask, Mr. Jefferson. It's Saturday. I know what day it is. Triple your usual rate. I need this done." There was a pause. "Yes, sir. I'll have it by 8 a.m. Marcus hung up and made another call. "Patricia, it's Marcus Jefferson." Mr. Jefferson, Patricia Okonkwo was his employment attorney, one of the best in Atlanta. "It's Saturday morning. I know. I need you to review some evidence. Wage theft, tip pool fraud, possible discrimination. That's serious. How extensive? $38,000 over 18 months, minimum, primarily affecting black and immigrant workers. Silence on the other end. Then I'll clear my afternoon. Send me what you have." Marcus spent the next 3 hours compiling documents, organizing evidence, building a case. He worked with the precision of a surgeon, the focus of an athlete, the determination of a man who had finally found something worth fighting for. At noon, his phone buzzed again. This time, it wasn't Raymond. "Mr. Jefferson, this is Dr. Carla Washington at Children's Healthcare of Atlanta. I'm calling regarding one of your employees, Grace Williams. She listed the Magnolia Room as her employer on our insurance verification form." Marcus's hand tightened on the phone. "Is everything okay? I'm not able to discuss her son's medical condition without her consent. But I am calling about a discrepancy in her insurance coverage. She's listed as working 40 hours per week, but her recent pay stubs show only 28 hours. If her hours have been permanently reduced below 30, she may lose eligibility for the family health plan." Marcus felt something cold settle in his stomach. "When was the reduction? It appears her hours were cut approximately 6 months ago, but the change was never reported to your insurance provider." "I see. Thank you for bringing this to my attention. I'll look into it personally." He hung up and stared at the wall. Victor hadn't just been stealing tips. He had been cutting hours without proper documentation, potentially jeopardizing employees' health insurance. Grace's health insurance. Her son's health insurance. An 8-year-old boy with sickle cell disease. Marcus closed his eyes and took a deep breath. When he opened them again, his jaw was set. Monday. Everything would change on Monday. But first, he needed one more piece of evidence. Saturday afternoon, Marcus drove back to the Magnolia Room. He parked in his reserved spot this time, walked through the front door in his regular clothes, his regular walk, his regular authority. The hostess nearly dropped her menus when she recognized him. "Mr. Jefferson, I didn't know you were coming today. I'm not here officially. I need to check something in the back office. Of course, let me get Victor for you. That won't be necessary." Marcus walked past her before she could argue. He moved through the restaurant like he owned it, which he did, nodding at the servers, smiling at the customers, projecting calm confidence. But inside, his heart was pounding. The back office was empty. Perfect. Marcus went straight to the lockers. He knew which one was Grace's from watching the security footage. Third from the left bottom row. He hesitated for a moment. This felt like a violation, but he needed to know what she had documented. Needed to know how her records matched his. He opened the locker. The manila envelope was right where he had seen her put it. Worn soft from handling labeled in careful handwriting Isaiah's future. Marcus opened it with trembling hands. 52 pieces of paper, napkins, receipts, scraps torn from order pads. Each one dated. Each one detailed. November 14th. Tables for 7-11-14. Estimated tips, $342. Victor gave me $67. November 7th. Tables 2, 5, 8, 9, 12. Estimated tips, $280. Victor gave me $54. October 30th. Tables 1, 6, 10. Chapter 15. Estimated tips, $300 tian. Victor gave me $71. Page after page. Week after week. Theft after theft. Grace had documented everything. Every shift. Every table. Every dollar she should have received versus every dollar Victor actually gave her. Marcus did quick mental math. Based on these records, Victor had stolen at least $12,000 from Grace alone. $12,000 that should have gone to medical bills, to groceries, to Isaiah's future. Marcus carefully photographed every page with his phone. Then he replaced the envelope exactly where he had found it and closed the locker. Grace Williams had built her own case. She just didn't know yet that someone was finally going to use it. Marcus left the restaurant without speaking to anyone else. He had what he needed. Now it was time to plan the confrontation. Sunday morning, Marcus woke to 3 voicemails and 17 text messages. Raymond, Marcus. I don't know what's going on with you, but the board is concerned. Call me. Raymond again. Seriously, call me. This isn't like you. Raymond a third time. Fine. Don't call. But whatever you're doing, I hope it's worth your career. Marcus deleted all of them. His phone buzzed with an incoming call. James Chen, his IT director. Mr. Jefferson. I have that background check you requested. Go ahead. Victor Kane. 34 years old. MBA from Georgia State, 2018. Previous employment floor manager at Seasons 52 in Midtown terminated after 14 months. Before that, assistant manager at a Chili's in Marietta resigned under unclear circumstances. Terminated. Why the official record says performance issues? But I found something interesting. There was a complaint filed with the Department of Labor 3 months before his termination. Wage theft allegation from a former server. The case was dropped when the complainant moved out of state. Marcus's grip tightened on his phone. So he's done this before. It appears so, sir. There's also a civil judgment against him from 2019. Unpaid debt to a former roommate. $7,000. He defaulted, never paid it. What about the bank deposits? Can you trace them? The account that received those deposits belongs to a Victor Kane at the same address as your employee. The money came in within 24 hours of each shift he managed. The amounts match the discrepancies in your POS data. So we have him. Sir, you have more than enough evidence to terminate him with cause and file criminal charges. This is open and shut wage theft. Marcus thanked James and hung up. Open and shut. After 18 months of stealing from his employees. After cutting the hours of black women. After exploiting people who couldn't fight back. Open and shut. But Marcus didn't want to just fire Victor Kane. He wanted to expose him. He wanted everyone to see what kind of man he really was. And he wanted Grace Williams to know that her documentation, her 52 pieces of paper, her Isaiah's future envelope had helped bring him down. Marcus spent Sunday afternoon writing his speech, the one he would deliver Monday morning in front of the entire staff. He rewrote it 7 times. Too angry, too cold, too formal, too emotional. Finally, around 6 p.m., he found the right words, the ones his father would have used. He saved the document and leaned back in his chair. Tomorrow. Everything changed. Tomorrow. His phone buzzed. A text from the unknown number again. From Grace. Thank you again for your kindness the other night. I don't know who you are, but I want you to know that it mattered. Isaiah is doing better. He's coming home tomorrow. God bless you. Marcus stared at the message. His finger hovered over the reply button. He wanted to tell her everything. Wanted to say, I'm the owner of the restaurant where you work. I saw what Victor did to you. I'm going to make it right. But not yet. She needed to hear it in person. She needed to see the evidence. She needed to understand that her own courage, her own documentation, was part of what brought Victor down. He typed a simple reply. "I'm glad he's doing better. You'll understand everything soon. Trust me." He hit send and went to bed. Monday arrived cold and gray, November rain streaking the windows of Marcus's office. He was there at 6 a.m. going over his notes one more time. The security footage was queued up on his laptop. The financial records were organized in a folder. Grace's documentation, the photographs he had taken of her 52 pages, was printed and ready. At 7, Patricia Okonkwo called. "I reviewed everything you sent," she said. "This is one of the clearest wage theft cases I've seen in 20 years of practice. You have video evidence, financial records, and victim documentation. Victor Kane is going to prison if you want him to. I want him to," Marcus said. "Then we file with the Department of Labor this afternoon. I'll also prepare civil suits on behalf of each affected employee. They can recover treble damages under Georgia law." Treble damages. 3 times what was stolen. Grace could recover over $36,000. One more thing Patricia said. The discrimination angle. "You mentioned that black and immigrant workers were disproportionately targeted for schedule cuts and tip theft." "That's correct. That opens up a Title VII complaint with the EEOC. Federal civil rights violation. We could pursue both state wage theft charges and federal discrimination charges simultaneously." "Do it," Marcus said. "All of it. Everything we can throw at him. Understood? I'll have the paperwork ready by end of business today." Marcus hung up and looked at the clock. 7:23 a.m. In less than 3 hours, Victor Kane's life was going to fall apart. At 9:15, Marcus pulled into the Magnolia Rooms parking lot. He sat in his car for a moment, looking at the building. His father had helped him choose this location, had walked the space with him, had put his hand on Marcus's shoulder and said, "This is the one, son. I can feel it." That was 4 years ago, a lifetime ago. Marcus got out of the car, straightened his tie, and walked through the front door. Angela, the hostess, nearly dropped her coffee cup. "Mr. Jefferson, we weren't expecting you. I sent a calendar invite last night. Mandatory staff meeting at 10. Is everyone here?" Angela's eyes were wide. "Yes, sir. Victor called everyone in. They're waiting in the conference room." "Good." Marcus walked toward the back of the restaurant, his footsteps steady, his heart pounding. This was it. He paused outside the conference room door. Through the glass, he could see them all. Denise looking nervous, Jennifer looking confused, Tyler looking bored. 2 line cooks, a busboy, the bartender, and Grace. She sat near the back, her hands folded on the table, her expression unreadable. She looked tired. Of course she did. Her son had just gotten out of the hospital. She probably hadn't slept more than a few hours in the past 3 days. But she was here. Professional, present, ready for whatever came next. Victor stood at the front of the room, arms crossed, projecting confidence. He had no idea what was about to happen. No idea that his entire world was about to collapse. Marcus took a breath. Thought of his father. Thought of Grace in that hospital room holding her son's hand. Thought of every employee who had walked away from this restaurant feeling cheated, diminished, worthless. Then he opened the door. The room went silent. Victor's face shifted from confusion to recognition to forced friendliness in the space of a second. "Mr. Jefferson." He stepped forward, hand extended. "This is an unexpected pleasure. I wasn't aware you'd be joining us personally." Marcus ignored the hand. "Sit down, Victor." Something flickered in Victor's eyes. Uncertainty, concern, the first crack in his armor. "I thought I'd run the meeting," Victor said, "since I'm the floor manager and all." "Sit down." The temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. Everyone felt it. Denise's eyes went wide. Jennifer shifted uncomfortably in her seat. Even Tyler, who never paid attention to anything, was suddenly very focused. Victor sat down. Marcus walked to the front of the room. He set his laptop on the table but didn't open it, not yet. He looked at each person in the room, one by one, meeting their eyes, acknowledging their presence. When he got to Grace, he held her gaze for an extra beat. She looked back at him, confused but steady. She didn't recognize him. Of course she didn't. The last time she had seen him, he had been wearing a faded construction jacket and dusty work boots hunched over a plate of free jambalaya. That was about to change. Thursday night, Marcus began his voice carrying to every corner of the room. "I sat in this restaurant, at table 14, near the kitchen entrance." Victor's expression flickered. What was that about? Marcus ignored him. "I was wearing my father's old work jacket, the one he wore for 25 years while building this company from nothing. I ordered water and cornbread, the cheapest things on the menu. Silence. Total, absolute silence. The hostess seated me at the worst table in the restaurant. The floor manager, he looked directly at Victor, told me that if I couldn't afford to be here, I should find somewhere more appropriate. Victor's face went pale. I don't know what you're talking about. I was told that we don't serve my kind here, that I was a waste of space, that I should take my broke ass somewhere else. The room was frozen. Nobody moved. Nobody breathed. Grace's hand had come up to cover her mouth. Her eyes were wide with recognition. And then Marcus continued, his voice softening. Something unexpected happened. He turned to look directly at Grace. A server came to my table. She asked if I'd had a long day. I said yes. She told me the kitchen had made extra jambalaya, a lie, a kind lie, and asked if I would help her out by eating some before it went to waste. Grace's eyes were glistening now. She knew. She finally knew. She gave me a $28 meal, no charge, out of her own pocket, because she believed that everyone who walks through that door deserves to be treated like they matter. Marcus paused. Let the words settle. Then she was punished for it. Victor stood up suddenly, his chair scraping against the floor. This is ridiculous. I don't know what kind of game you're playing, but I won't sit here and be accused of something without evidence. Marcus smiled. It wasn't a warm smile. You want evidence? He opened his laptop and turned the screen to face the room. The security footage began to play. Victor, alone in the back office, counting the tip jar, bills disappearing into his jacket pocket, over and over again, 47 times. The room erupted. Denise gasped. Jennifer made a sound like she had been punched. Tyler was suddenly very awake, staring at the screen with his mouth open. Grace didn't make a sound. She just watched her face, unreadable tears streaming silently down her cheeks. Victor's face had gone from pale to gray to a sickly green. That's not what it looks like, he stammered. I was just organizing the tips, making change. This is a misunderstanding. Really, Marcus's voice was ice. Then explain why your bank deposits match the exact amounts missing from the tip pool. $835 on October 31st, $890 on November 3rd, $912 on November 5th. He pulled out the financial records and spread them across the table. Every dollar you stole, Victor. Every single one. Documented. Traced. Recorded. Victor backed away from the table, his hands up like he was surrendering. You can't prove any of this. This is circumstantial. My lawyer will tear it apart. Marcus reached into his folder and pulled out a stack of photographs. Then maybe you'd like to explain these. He held up the first photograph. Grace's handwriting. November 14th. Tables. 7/11/14. Estimated tips $342. Victor gave me $67. Victor's eyes went wide. Where did you get that? One of your employees has been documenting every shift for the past year. Every table, every tip, every dollar you stole from her. Marcus looked at Grace. 52 pages, Grace. 52 nights of evidence. I found your envelope, Isaiah's future, and I photographed every single page. Grace stood up slowly. Her whole body was trembling. You, she whispered. You were the man in the jacket. I was, Marcus said gently. And you gave me more than a meal that night. You gave me proof of who you really are, and who he really is. He pointed at Victor. This man has stolen approximately $38,000 from the employees of this restaurant over the past 18 months. He has systematically cut the hours of black and immigrant workers, targeting them specifically for the worst schedules and the smallest tip pools. He has violated federal labor laws, state wage theft statutes, and basic human decency. Marcus turned to face Victor directly. Victor Kane, you're fired. Effective immediately, security is waiting outside to escort you from the building. Victor lunged forward, his face contorted with rage. You can't do this. I have rights. I have a contract. Your contract specifically prohibits theft from employees. Marcus didn't flinch. You violated it 47 times. On camera. 2 security guards appeared in the doorway, summoned by a text Marcus had sent before the meeting. This isn't over, Victor snarled as the guards took his arms. I'll sue. I'll destroy you. You'll regret this. Marcus watched him being dragged toward the door. At the last moment, he spoke. Victor. The guards paused. Victor turned, hatred burning in his eyes. The Department of Labor will be filing criminal charges against you this afternoon, Marcus said calmly. My attorney is also preparing civil suits on behalf of every employee you robbed, and the EEOC will be investigating your pattern of discrimination against black workers. He paused. So no, Victor, this isn't over. For you, it's just beginning. The guards pulled Victor through the door. His screams of protest echoed down the hallway, then faded into silence. Marcus turned back to the room. 8 faces stared at him. Shock. disbelief, relief, hope, and Grace still standing, still trembling, tears streaming down her face. Marcus walked toward her. "I owe you an apology," he said. "I should have known what was happening in my own restaurant. I should have protected you, all of you." He looked around the room. "I got too focused on growth, on numbers, on profit. I forgot what my father taught me, that your people are your business, that you protect them like family." He reached into his folder and pulled out a stack of envelopes. "I had my accountant calculate exactly how much was stolen from each of you over the past 18 months. Every dollar, with interest." He started calling names. Denise Harper, $8,400 stolen, with 18% interest, that's $9,912. He handed her an envelope. Denise opened it, saw the check, and burst into tears. Jennifer Walsh, $6,200, with interest $7,316. Jennifer's hands were shaking so badly she could barely hold the envelope. Tyler Robinson, $5,800, with interest $6,844. Tyler for once had nothing sarcastic to say. He just stared at the check with his mouth open. Marcus continued through the list. Every employee, every dollar, every wrong made right. Finally, he reached the last envelope. Grace Williams. Grace looked at him. Her face was a battlefield of emotions, hope and fear and gratitude and grief, all fighting for dominance. $12,800 stolen from you, Marcus said softly, with interest $15,104. He held out the envelope. Grace took it with trembling hands, opened it, stared at the check, and collapsed into her chair, sobbing. Denise rushed to her side, wrapped her arms around her. The other employees gathered close, a circle of support and solidarity. Marcus let them have the moment. When Grace finally looked up, her eyes red and swollen, she said one word. Why? Marcus knelt beside her chair, putting himself at her eye level. Because you showed kindness to a stranger when it cost you. Because you documented injustice for a year and never gave up hope. Because you sat in a hospital room with your son and still came to work the next day. He paused. Because you're exactly the kind of person my father built this company for, and I won't let anyone take that away from you. Not ever again. Grace stared at him for a long moment. Then she did something unexpected. She laughed, a real laugh, full of relief and release and something that sounded almost like joy. Your father sounds like a good man, she said. He was, Marcus replied. The best man I ever knew. Grace wiped her eyes. Mine too. He used to say the measure of a person is how they treat people who can't do anything for them. Marcus smiled. My father said the exact same thing. Almost word for word. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The silence was comfortable, warm, full of understanding. Then Grace stood up, straightened her shoulders, and looked Marcus directly in the eyes. So what happens now? Marcus stood too. Now, he said, we build something better. Together. And they did. The conference room emptied slowly. Denise hugged Grace 3 times before finally leaving, clutching her envelope like it might disappear if she let go. Tyler walked out in a daze, staring at his check, bumping into the doorframe on his way out. Jennifer stopped to shake Marcus's hand, tears still streaming down her face, unable to form words. One by one they left, until only Marcus and Grace remained. The silence between them was heavy with everything that had just happened, everything that was about to change. Grace looked down at the check in her hands. $15,104. More money than she had seen in one place in her entire life. This is real, she said quietly. This is actually happening. It's real, Marcus confirmed. And it's only the beginning. Grace looked up at him. Her eyes were still red from crying, but something new was in them now. Curiosity, wariness, hope fighting against years of disappointment. What do you mean, the beginning? Marcus pulled out a chair and sat down across from her. He needed her at eye level for this conversation. Needed her to see that he meant every word. I need to tell you something, he said. Something I should have said before everyone else left. Grace's guard went up immediately. Marcus saw it happen, the walls rising, the protection kicking in. She had been hurt too many times to trust easily. What is it? Marcus took a breath. When I went to your locker on Saturday, when I photographed your documentation, I also saw something else. Grace went very still. What did you see? I saw the label on your envelope. Isaiah's future. Grace's breath caught. That was private? I know. And I'm sorry for invading your privacy, but Grace, I need you to understand something. He leaned forward. I made some calls this weekend. To the hospital, to your insurance provider, to my HR department. Grace's face went pale. What kind of calls? The kind that told me Victor wasn't just stealing your tips. He was also cutting your hours without reporting it to payroll, which means for the past 6 months you've been one missed shift away from losing your health insurance. Grace's hands started trembling. The check slipped from her fingers and floated to the table. I didn't know she whispered. I knew he was cutting my hours, but I didn't know it affected my insurance. It shouldn't have. Marcus's voice was firm. That's a violation of company policy and federal law. Victor was supposed to report any schedule changes to HR within 48 hours. He never did. He was hiding what he was doing. Grace pressed her hands flat on the table, trying to steady herself. If I had lost my insurance, Isaiah wouldn't have been covered. The words hung in the air between them. The weight of what could have happened. What almost happened. That's why I'm here, Grace Marcus said. Not just to give you back your stolen money, I'm here to make sure nothing like this ever happens again. How Grace's voice cracked. How can you promise that Marcus reached into his folder and pulled out a document? He slid it across the table to her. Grace looked down at the paper. Her eyes scanned the words. Her face went through shock, confusion, disbelief, and finally something that looked almost like fear. This says Assistant General Manager. It does. You're offering me a job. I'm offering you a partnership, Marcus corrected. I need someone who understands what the employees here go through. Someone who will protect them the way I should have been protecting them all along. Someone who will never let another Victor Kane happen. Grace shook her head slowly. I'm a waitress. I've been a waitress for 12 years. I don't know anything about managing a restaurant. You know how to treat people with dignity. You know how to work harder than anyone else in the room. You know how to document injustice and never give up hope. Marcus leaned forward. Grace, I've been running this company for 3 years and I forgot the most important thing my father ever taught me. You reminded me of it with one act of kindness to a stranger you thought had nothing. Grace's eyes filled with tears again, but she didn't look away. What did your father teach you? She asked. That your people are your business. That you protect them like family. That the measure of a person is how they treat people who can't do anything for them. Grace made a sound that was half laugh, half sob. My daddy used to say the exact same thing. I know, you told me that night, when you gave me the jambalaya. Grace wiped her eyes, looked at the document again, looked at Marcus. What does this job actually involve? You'll work directly with me to rebuild the culture here. New systems for tip tracking, new policies for scheduling, new training for managers. And most importantly, you'll be the person employees come to when something's wrong, the person who listens, the person who acts. Grace was quiet for a long moment. Marcus could see her thinking, calculating, weighing the risks against the rewards. What about my insurance? She finally asked. If I change positions, does my coverage stay the same? Marcus smiled. I was hoping you'd ask that. He pulled out another document. This is the benefits package for the Assistant General Manager position. Full health coverage with dependent care. 0 copay for chronic disease management. 100% coverage for specialist appointments. Grace's hand flew to her mouth. Isaiah, she whispered. His medication. His doctors. Everything. Everything, Marcus confirmed. Plus a 35% salary increase and a $3,000 annual education stipend that you can use for yourself or put toward Isaiah's college fund. Grace couldn't speak. Her whole body was shaking. Why she finally managed. Why are you doing all this? Marcus was quiet for a moment, thinking about his father, about Sandra, about all the people he had lost and all the people he had failed. Because I spent 3 years building an empire and forgetting to build a family, he said. Because you showed me what I was missing. Because my father would have done the same thing if he were still here. Grace looked at him with those warm brown eyes, and Marcus felt something shift in his chest. Something he hadn't felt in a very long time. Your father sounds like he was a good man, Grace said. He was the best man I ever knew. Mine too. Grace smiled through her tears. He died when I was 19. Worked himself to death, the doctor said. Too many hours, too much stress, not enough rest. I'm sorry, don't be. He died doing what he loved, taking care of his family, making sure we had everything we needed. She looked at the job offer again. He would have told me to take this job, she said quietly. He would have said it was an answer to prayer. What would you tell him? Marcus asked. Grace looked up, met his eyes, held his gaze. I would tell him that sometimes angels wear worn-out jackets and order cornbread. Marcus felt his throat tighten. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then Grace picked up the pen from the table, signed her name at the bottom of the document, and slid it back across to Marcus. When do I start? She asked. Marcus smiled. How about right now, Grace Williams started her new job at 11:47 a.m. on a Monday. By noon, she was already making changes. The first thing she did was call a meeting with the remaining servers. Not in the conference room where Victor had held court, but in the dining room at a table near the window where the light was warm and the atmosphere felt less like a courthouse. Denise, Jennifer, Tyler, and the others gathered around her, their faces a mixture of hope and uncertainty. "I know you're all scared," Grace began. "I'm scared too." But what happened this morning was the beginning of something better, not the end. Tyler spoke up first. "Easy for you to say. You got promoted. What do we get?" Grace looked at him steadily. "You get a voice. Starting right now." She pulled out a notepad and pen. "I want to know everything that's been wrong here. Not just what Victor did, but everything. The scheduling, the shift assignments, the way customers treat you, the way you treat each other, all of it." Denise raised her hand hesitantly. "You mean you actually want to hear it? I want to fix it, but I can't fix what I don't know about." The floodgates opened. For the next 2 hours, Grace listened. She took notes, she asked questions, she didn't judge, didn't interrupt, didn't make excuses. Jennifer talked about the time Victor made her work a double shift with a fever because he didn't want to cover for her himself. Tyler talked about the racist jokes Victor made in the break room, the ones everyone laughed at because they were too scared not to. Denise talked about the time she reported a customer for sexual harassment, and Victor told her to be flattered and stop making trouble. One by one, the stories poured out. Years of mistreatment, years of silence, years of feeling invisible and worthless and trapped. Grace wrote it all down, every word, every name, every date she could verify. When the last person finished speaking, the room was silent, heavy with the weight of everything that had been said. Grace set down her pen and looked at each of them. "Thank you," she said simply, "for trusting me with this. What happens now?" Denise asked. "Now we build something better." Grace stood up. "Starting with one simple rule that will never change." She looked around this table. "Everyone who works here matters. Everyone who walks through that door matters. And anyone who forgets that anyone who treats you like you're less than human will answer to me personally." The words hung in the air. A promise. A challenge. A new beginning? Tyler was the first to speak. He grinned, the cynicism finally cracking. "Damn, Grace, you sound like you actually mean it." Grace met his eyes. "I do, and if I ever forget it, I expect you to remind me." The tension in the room broke. Denise laughed. Jennifer smiled. Even the quiet busboy in the corner cracked a grin. For the first time in years, the staff of the Magnolia Room felt like something other than prisoners. They felt like a family. By 3:00 p.m., Grace had drafted a list of 27 changes that needed to happen immediately. By 4:00 p.m., she had presented the list to Marcus in his temporary office on the second floor. By 5:00 p.m., they were arguing. "You want to install cameras in the back office," Marcus asked, frowning at the list. "Not to spy on people, to protect them. If Victor had known he was being watched, he never would have stolen those tips. But employees will feel like Big Brother is watching. Employees already feel like they're being watched." Grace's voice was firm. "The difference is now the watching will protect them instead of hurt them. And I want the footage to be accessible to everyone, not just management. Transparency." Marcus studied her face. She wasn't backing down. She believed in this. "Fine," he said. "Cameras. But we announce it clearly and explain why. That's all I'm asking." They moved to the next item on the list. And the next. And the next. Some changes Marcus agreed to immediately. Others he pushed back on. But every disagreement was respectful, professional, productive. Two people working toward the same goal from different perspectives. By 7:00 p.m., they had finalized 14 changes that would be implemented within the week. By 8:00 p.m., Grace realized she had forgotten to eat lunch. "You need to go home?" Marcus said, noticing her fatigue. "Isaiah will be wondering where you are." Grace's face softened at the mention of her son's name. "He's with Mama Ruth. She texted me an hour ago, said they're watching cartoons and eating ice cream. Sounds like he's in good hands." "The best?" Grace smiled. "But you're right, I should go." She gathered her notes, her lists, her plans for the future, but at the door she paused. "Marcus." "Yes? Why did you really go undercover?" "You could have just audited the books," fired Victor quietly. "Handled it all without ever sitting at that table in your father's jacket." Marcus was quiet for a long moment. Grace waited. "Because my father used to say that you can't lead people from a distance," he finally said. "You have to walk where they walk, eat what they eat, feel what they feel." He looked at her. "I had forgotten that. For 3 years, I sat in my office and looked at numbers. I forgot that the numbers were people. You reminded me. Grace nodded slowly. Your father was right, and so are you. She opened the door. Good night, Marcus. Good night, Grace. She left, and Marcus sat alone in his office staring at the city lights through the window, thinking about everything that had changed in 4 days, and everything that was still about to change. Tuesday morning came too early. Grace was at the restaurant by 6:00 a.m., 3 hours before opening, just reviewing inventory reports she barely understood and making notes about things she needed to learn. Her phone buzzed at 6:47 a.m. Mama Ruth. Baby girl. When did you become a morning person? Since yesterday, apparently. Grace laughed. How's Isaiah sleeping like an angel? His color is better this morning. I think the new medication is helping. Grace felt her heart swell. The prescription for hydroxyurea had been filled yesterday afternoon, paid for by her new insurance. $160. Covered completely. Tell him I love him when he wakes up. I will, baby. Now go do your job. Make your daddy proud. Grace hung up and stared at her phone for a moment. Make your daddy proud. That had been Mama Ruth's blessing for as long as Grace could remember, before every test, before every job interview, before every hard thing. And today was definitely going to be hard. At 8:00 a.m., the first problem arrived. A delivery truck pulled up to the back entrance, and the driver refused to unload because the invoice showed a balance due from 3 months ago. Grace called Marcus. No answer. She called the accounting department. They found the invoice. Victor had marked it as paid, but the payment had never been processed. $3,400 sitting in limbo. Grace made a decision. She wrote a personal check from her new account, the one with the $15,000 from yesterday, and paid the balance on the spot. The driver unloaded the supplies. The kitchen opened on time. Crisis averted. Marcus called back at 8:47 a.m. You paid a $3,000 invoice out of your own pocket. I'll submit it for reimbursement. But we needed those supplies to open today. There was a long pause. You've been on the job for less than 24 hours, Marcus finally said, and you've already solved a problem I didn't even know existed. Grace smiled. That's what you're paying me for. I'm starting to think I'm underpaying you. The morning rush was brutal. With Victor gone and the staff still shell-shocked from yesterday's revelations, everything felt off balance. Orders got mixed up. Food took too long. Customers complained. Grace worked the floor alongside the servers, running food busing tables, doing whatever needed to be done. She hadn't intended to wait tables on her first day as assistant general manager, but the restaurant needed all hands. At 11:30 a.m., a customer snapped his fingers at her. Miss, my water is empty. Grace looked at the man. White mid-50s expensive suit, the kind of customer Victor would have fawned over. She walked to his table, picked up his water glass, and refilled it from the pitcher she was carrying. Is there anything else I can help you with, sir? Yes, your service is terrible. I've been waiting 20 minutes for my check. Grace felt the old familiar burn of humiliation rising in her chest, but she pushed it down. I apologize for the wait. We're short-staffed today. Let me get that for you right away. She walked to the POS station, printed his check, and brought it back within 60 seconds. The man paid with a credit card, left 0 tip, walked out without a word. Denise appeared at Grace's elbow. Are you okay? I'm fine. That guy was a complete jerk. Grace shrugged. Some people are. That's not going to change just because we want it to, but doesn't it make you angry? Grace turned to look at her younger colleague. Of course it does, but my daddy used to say that holding on to anger is like drinking poison and expecting the other person to die. Denise considered this. Your daddy sounds like a smart man. He was. Grace smiled. The smartest man I ever knew. The lunch rush ended at 2:30 p.m. Grace finally sat down for the first time in 6 hours. Her feet were screaming, her back ached, but for the first time in years, she felt something other than exhaustion. She felt purpose. Marcus appeared at her table with 2 cups of coffee. You look like you need this. Grace took the cup gratefully. Thank you. It's been a day. I saw you on the floor. Marcus sat across from her. You didn't have to do that. You're management now. Grace sipped her coffee. Management that doesn't understand the floor isn't real management. That's what got us Victor in the first place. Marcus nodded slowly. You're right. I should have remembered that. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, 2 people catching their breath in the eye of the storm. Grace Marcus said finally, There's something I need to tell you. Grace's guard went up immediately. What is it I got a call this morning? From Victor's attorney. Grace set down her coffee cup. Her hands were suddenly unsteady. What did he want? Victor is claiming wrongful termination. He's threatening to sue the company for defamation and emotional distress. Grace felt her stomach drop. Can he do that? He can file anything he wants. Whether he wins is another matter. Marcus pulled out his phone and showed her a text message. This is what his lawyer sent me at 7:30 this morning. Grace read the message. Her face went pale. He's claiming that the security footage was doctored, that I planted evidence, that I had a personal vendetta against him. He's lying. Of course he's lying, but that doesn't mean he won't cause damage while he tries to prove it. Grace looked up from the phone. What do? We fight. Marcus's voice was calm, certain. I have Patricia Okonkwo, one of the best employment lawyers in the state, already working on this. We have the evidence, we have the testimony, we have the truth. But Victor has lawyers too, Grace said quietly, and he has nothing to lose. Marcus reached across the table and touched her hand. It was the first time he had touched her since they met. The contact was electric. Grace, he said, I need you to understand something. She looked at him, waiting. Victor Kane is going to try to destroy us. He's going to lie, threaten, manipulate. He's going to try to make us doubt ourselves and doubt each other. Grace nodded. I know, but here's what he doesn't understand. Marcus's grip on her hand tightened. He doesn't understand that we're not alone. He doesn't understand that the people he hurt for 18 months are going to stand together. He doesn't understand that the truth is more powerful than any lie he can tell. Grace felt tears prickling at her eyes. You really believe that I have to believe it? Marcus's voice was rough with emotion. Because if I don't, then everything my father built was for nothing, and I'm not going to let that happen. Grace looked at this man, this stranger who had walked into her restaurant 4 days ago in a torn jacket and dusty boots, this owner who had humbled himself to see the truth, this person who was fighting for people he barely knew, and she made a decision. Neither am I, she said. The afternoon passed in a blur of activity. At 4:00 p.m., Grace held a training session on the new tip tracking system. Every server learned how to log their tips in real time, how to access the daily reports, how to verify that what they earned was what they received. At 5:00 p.m., Marcus announced that the company would be installing transparent tip pooling software that every employee could access. No more black boxes. No more trust me. Everything visible. Everything verifiable. At 6:00 p.m., the dinner rush began and Grace was back on the floor, working alongside her team. At 7:30 p.m., she got a text message that stopped her heart. The number was blocked. The message was simple. I know where your son goes to school. Grace's phone nearly slipped from her fingers. She stood frozen in the middle of the dining room staring at the screen. Denise noticed. Grace? What's wrong? Grace couldn't speak. She held up the phone. Denise read the message. Her face went white. Oh my God, is that from Victor? It has to be. Grace's voice was barely a whisper. Who else would do this? She turned and walked toward the back office, her legs moving automatically, her mind spinning with fear. Marcus was reviewing inventory reports when she burst through the door. Grace, what's going on? She handed him her phone without a word. Marcus read the message. His expression went from confusion to understanding to cold fury in the space of 3 seconds. That son of a bitch! What do I do? Grace's voice cracked. He knows where Isaiah goes to school. He's threatening my son. Marcus was already on his phone dialing. Patricia, it's Marcus. We have a situation. He put the call on speaker. What kind of situation? Patricia's voice was sharp, professional. Victor Kane just sent a threatening message to one of my employees. She handed her phone to the lawyer's voice. Read it. Grace read the message aloud. Her voice trembled but held steady. That's witness intimidation, Patricia said immediately. And if he knows the child's school, that's potentially stalking. I'm calling the police. The police. Grace felt panic rising. I can't have police involved. If this gets messy, if it affects Isaiah. Grace. Marcus's voice cut through her fear. Listen to me. She looked at him. Victor is a bully, and the only thing bullies understand is strength. If we let him scare us into silence, he wins. But if we fight back, if we show him that threatening an 8-year-old child has consequences, then he loses. Grace stared at him. Her whole body was trembling. What if he does something? What if he hurts? Isaiah, Marcus took her hands in his, held them firmly. I will hire private security for your son's school tomorrow morning. I will have someone watching Isaiah from the moment he arrives until the moment you pick him up. I will not let anything happen to your child. Grace felt tears streaming down her face. You would do that, Grace. Marcus's voice was thick with emotion. You gave a stranger a free meal because you thought he was hungry. You documented 18 months of abuse because you believed someone would eventually care. You are the most courageous person I have ever met. He squeezed her hands. I will protect your son like he's my own. I promise you that. Grace broke. She fell into Marcus's arms sobbing. All the fear, all the stress, all the years of carrying everything alone, it poured out of her in that moment. And Marcus held her. Didn't let go, didn't pull away, just held her. Patricia's voice came through the speaker, gentle but urgent. Grace, I need you to forward me that message, and I need you to give me permission to contact the police on your behalf. Grace pulled back from Marcus, wiped her eyes, took a breath. Do it, she said. Do whatever you have to do? Good. Patricia's tone hardened. Victor Kane just made the biggest mistake of his life. The police arrived at 8:45 p.m. 2 officers, 1 black woman and 1 white man, both professional, both sympathetic. They took Grace's statement, documented the threatening message, and assured her that they would be visiting Victor Kane within the hour. We take threats against children very seriously, the female officer said. Regardless of the circumstances. What happens now? Grace asked. He'll be brought in for questioning. If we can establish that he sent the message, he'll be charged with harassment and witness intimidation. Depending on his priors, he could be looking at jail time. Grace nodded. Thank you. The officers left. Grace sat in the back office staring at her phone. Marcus sat beside her. Are you okay? No. Grace's voice was hollow. But I will be. The restaurant closed at 10:00 p.m. Grace stayed to help clean up, needing the physical activity to calm her racing mind. At 10:47 p.m. her phone rang. Blocked number. She hesitated, then answered. Hello, you think you've won? Victor's voice was slurred, clearly drunk. You think you can take everything from me and walk away clean. Victor, I'm recording this call. I don't care. His voice rose. I built that restaurant. I made it profitable. And you worthless bitch, you stole it from me. I didn't steal anything. You stole from us. From all of us. Lies. All lies. Victor's breathing was heavy, ragged. You and that self-righteous owner. You think you're better than me? You're nothing. You're nobody. Grace's hands were shaking, but her voice was steady. You threatened my son, Victor, an 8-year-old child. What kind of man does that? The kind of man who has nothing left to lose. There was something in his voice. Something dark. Something dangerous. Victor, Grace said carefully. What are you going to do? Laughter. Cold, hollow laughter. You'll find out. You'll all find out. The line went dead. Grace stared at her phone. Her heart was pounding so hard she could hear it in her ears. She called Marcus immediately. He answered on the first ring. Grace. What's wrong? Victor just called me. She could barely get the words out. He's drunk. He's angry. And Marcus, he said we'll all find out. Like he's planning something. Where are you? Still at the restaurant. Don't move. I'm coming. Marcus arrived in 12 minutes. He found Grace in the back office, clutching her phone, barely breathing. He took one look at her face and pulled out his own phone. Patricia, it's Marcus. Victor made another contact. This time by phone. He put the call on speaker. Grace played the recording she had made. When it finished, Patricia's voice was grim. That's enough for a restraining order. But more importantly, that last comment you'll all find out that could be interpreted as a threat of violence. What do we do? Marcus asked. I'm calling the police again, right now. And Marcus, I want you to close the restaurant tomorrow. Keep everyone safe until we know what we're dealing with. Close the restaurant. That's our busiest day of the week. A business can recover from lost revenue. It can't recover from a tragedy. Grace looked at Marcus. Her eyes were wide with fear. She's right, Grace whispered. We have to protect our people. Marcus nodded slowly. All right. We close tomorrow. But Patricia, I want officers at the restaurant. I want them watching. If Victor shows up, I want him arrested immediately. I'll make the calls. Patricia said, stay safe tonight, both of you. The line went dead. Grace and Marcus stood in the empty restaurant surrounded by silence. You should go home, Marcus said. Get some sleep. Tomorrow is going to be a long day. Grace shook her head. I can't go home. Not after those threats. Not with Isaiah there. Then stay with me. The words hung in the air between them. Marcus seemed surprised he had said them. He added quickly, I have a guest room. It's safe. My building has security. You can bring Isaiah and your mother. I have plenty of space. Grace looked at him. This man who had walked into her life 4 days ago. This stranger who had become her ally, her defender, her friend. Are you sure? She asked. Marcus met her eyes. I've never been more sure of anything. Grace called Mama Ruth, explained the situation, asked her to pack bags for herself and Isaiah. Then she drove to Marcus's building, a high-rise in Buckhead with 24-hour security and a doorman who called ahead before letting anyone through. The guest room was larger than Grace's entire apartment. Isaiah fell asleep within minutes, exhausted from his medication and the stress of the past few days. Mama Ruth settled into the second guest room, already planning breakfast for the morning, and Grace stood at the window looking out at the city lights, feeling something she hadn't felt in years. Safe. She felt safe. Marcus appeared behind her. "Can't sleep, not yet. Too much in my head." He stood beside her at the window, close enough to feel his warmth, not close enough to touch. "Grace," he said quietly, "I need you to know something." "What?" "When I went undercover on Thursday, I expected to find evidence of theft. I expected to find a corrupt manager. I expected to fire someone and move on with my life." He turned to look at her. "I didn't expect to find you." Grace's heart skipped. "What do you mean, I mean that you showed me something I had forgotten? That kindness matters. That dignity matters. That treating people like they're human beings is more important than profit margins and quarterly reports." Grace felt tears threatening again. She blinked them back. "You showed me too," she said, "that there are still good people in the world, that someone might actually care about what happens to people like me." Marcus reached out, touched her face. "So gentle." "Grace," he whispered, "you're not people like you. You're you. And you're the most remarkable person I've ever met." For a long moment they stood there. Two people who had found each other in the most unexpected way. Two people who had been broken by life and were slowly learning to heal. Then Grace smiled. "You know what my daddy would say right now? What he'd say, the Lord works in mysterious ways." Marcus laughed softly. "My father would say the same thing." They stood at the window together watching the city lights, feeling the warmth of connection. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. Victor's threats, the police investigation, the work of rebuilding a restaurant and a staff that had been damaged for too long. But tonight, in this moment, Grace Williams felt something she hadn't felt in years. Hope. Real hope. And she held on to it with both hands. Wednesday morning arrived with the weight of everything that had come before. Grace woke at 5:17 a.m. in Marcus's guest room, disoriented for a moment by the unfamiliar ceiling, the soft sheets that smelled like lavender, the silence that was different from her cramped apartment where the neighbor's television always bled through the walls. Then she remembered. Victor's threats, the police, Marcus's offer of safety. She got out of bed quietly and padded down the hallway to check on Isaiah. Her son was still sleeping, his small body curled under the blankets, his breathing steady and peaceful. The medication was working. His color was better than it had been in months. Mama Ruth was already awake, standing in the kitchen with a cup of coffee, staring out at the Atlanta skyline. "Couldn't sleep either?" Grace asked. Mama Ruth shook her head. "Too much on my mind. How are you holding up?" Baby girl Grace poured herself a cup of coffee and stood beside her mother. "I don't know. Scared. Angry. Grateful. All at once." "That man," Mama Ruth said quietly. "Marcus, he's a good one." "I know. You trust him?" Grace thought about the question, really thought about it. "Yes," she said finally. "I trust him." Mama Ruth nodded slowly. "Good. Because I think he's going to need you as much as you need him before this is all over." Before Grace could ask what she meant, her phone buzzed. A text from Patricia Okonkwo. "Call me immediately. Important development." Grace's stomach dropped. She dialed the number with trembling fingers. Patricia answered on the first ring. "Grace, we have a situation." "What kind of situation?" "Victor was arrested last night at 11:47 p.m. He was pulled over for erratic driving 3 blocks from your apartment building." Grace felt her blood run cold. "My apartment? He had a baseball bat in his front seat and a can of gasoline in his trunk." The words hit Grace like a physical blow. She grabbed the counter to steady herself. She couldn't finish the sentence. "We don't know exactly what he was planning, but the police found printouts of your address, your son's school schedule, and Marcus's home address in his car. He was carrying a loaded handgun without a permit." Grace's knees buckled. Mama Ruth caught her, eased her into a chair. "What happens now?" Grace whispered. "He's being held without bail. The judge considered him a flight risk and a danger to the community. He's facing charges for stalking, criminal threats, illegal weapons possession, and attempted arson." Attempted arson, the gasoline, Grace. Combined with the threats and the bat, the prosecutor is arguing he intended to set fire to your home. Grace couldn't breathe. The room was spinning. Mama Ruth took the phone from her hand. "This is Ruth Williams, Grace's mother. Is my grandbaby safe for now?" "Yes." Patricia's voice was steady, professional. "Victor is in custody and will remain there through the trial, but I want to recommend that Grace and Isaiah stay somewhere secure until we're certain there's no further threat. Victor may have had associates." "We're at Marcus Jefferson's residence," Mama Ruth said. "He's providing security." "Good. Stay there. I'll call with updates." The line went dead. Grace sat at the kitchen table, shaking. Her entire body was trembling with a fear so deep it felt like it lived in her bones. Mama Ruth knelt beside her. "Look at me, baby girl." Grace looked up. Her mother's face was strong, certain, fierce. "That man is in jail. He can't hurt you. He can't hurt Isaiah. The Lord protected us last night. We were supposed to be in that apartment, and we weren't." Grace realized what her mother was saying. If Marcus hadn't offered them a place to stay, if they had gone home like normal, Victor would have found them. Grace broke down completely, sobbing in her mother's arms like a child. "It's okay," Mama Ruth whispered. "It's okay. We're safe. We're all safe." Marcus found them like that 20 minutes later. He had been on the phone with Patricia himself getting the same briefing. His face was pale when he walked into the kitchen. Grace looked up at him. Her eyes were red and swollen. "You saved us," she said. Her voice was raw. "If you hadn't brought us here last night..." Marcus crossed the room in 3 strides. He knelt beside her chair, took her hands in his. "Grace, listen to me. You saved yourself. You documented 18 months of abuse. You stood up to Victor. You didn't give in to fear, but I just provided a guest room." Marcus's voice was thick with emotion. "You provided the courage." Grace stared at him. This man who had walked into her life as a stranger in a worn jacket. This man who had become her employer, her ally, her protector. This man who was looking at her like she was the most important person in the world. "Thank you," she whispered, "for everything." Marcus squeezed her hands. "We're not done yet, but we will be. I promise you that." The restaurant reopened on Thursday. Marcus had called every employee, personally explained the situation, assured them that Victor was in custody and couldn't hurt anyone. He offered paid time off to anyone who felt unsafe, no questions asked. Every single person showed up. Denise arrived at 9:00 a.m. with a casserole dish for the break room. "Comfort food," she explained. "My grandmother's recipe. For the team." Tyler arrived at 9:15 a.m. with a box of donuts. "Figured we could all use some sugar." Jennifer arrived at 9:30 a.m. with flowers for the hostess stand. "Something beautiful," she said, "to remind us what we're fighting for." One by one they came. The cooks, the busboys, the dishwashers, the hostesses, every single member of the staff that Victor had terrorized for 18 months. They came to stand together, to show that they weren't afraid anymore. Grace stood in the center of the dining room at 10:45 a.m., 15 minutes before opening. She looked at the faces around her, the people who had become her family. "I want to thank you all," she said, her voice steady, "for being here, for showing up, for not letting fear win." Denise spoke up. "We're not just here for ourselves, Grace. We're here for you, for everything you've done." Tyler nodded. "You stood up for us when nobody else would. Now we stand up for you." Grace felt tears threatening again, but she blinked them back. "Then let's get to work," she said. "We have a restaurant to run." The doors opened at 11:00 a.m., and the customers came. Word had spread through the Atlanta business community about what had happened at the Magnolia Room, about the owner who went undercover to expose corruption, about the waitress who documented abuse and was promoted to management, about the predator who was now sitting in jail. People wanted to support them. People wanted to be part of the story. By noon, every table was full. By 1:00 p.m., there was a 30-minute wait. By 2:00 p.m., Grace had to call in 2 off-duty servers just to keep up. Marcus worked the floor alongside his staff, clearing tables, running food, doing whatever needed to be done. At 2:47 p.m., a woman approached Grace near the hostess stand. "Are you Grace Williams?" Grace nodded cautiously. "Yes. Can I help you?" The woman was in her 60s, elegant, well-dressed. Her eyes were kind, but serious. "My name is Margaret Chen. I'm a reporter for the Atlanta Journal-Constitution. I'd like to talk to you about your story." Grace's heart rate spiked. "I don't know if I should. I understand your hesitation, but this story matters. What happened here? The wage theft, the discrimination, the courage to fight back. People need to hear about it." Grace looked across the room at Marcus. He was watching his expression, questioning. She held up a finger to Margaret. "One moment." Grace walked over to Marcus and explained the situation. "What do you think?" she asked. Marcus considered for a moment. "I think the choice is yours. But I also think that your story could help a lot of people. There are millions of workers out there being exploited by people like Victor. If they hear what you did, maybe they'll find the courage to fight back too." Grace thought about her father, about the values he had taught her, about standing up for what was right even when it was hard. She walked back to Margaret Chen. "Okay," she said, "I'll talk." The interview lasted 2 hours. Grace told Margaret everything, the stolen tips, the cut hours, the documentation she had kept in a manila envelope labeled Isaiah's future, the night Marcus walked in wearing his father's jacket, the kindness she had shown him without knowing who he was. Margaret took notes, asked questions, recorded everything with Grace's permission. At the end, she looked at Grace with something like admiration. "You know," she said, "most people in your situation would have given up, would have quit, found another job, tried to forget." Grace shook her head. "I couldn't forget. My son was depending on me, and somewhere inside I believed that if I just kept documenting, kept fighting, someone would eventually care. And someone did. Yes." Grace smiled softly. "Someone did." The article was published on Friday morning. Atlanta waitress exposes wage theft scheme, becomes restaurant manager. The headline spread across social media like wildfire. By noon, the article had been shared over 50,000 times. By evening, Grace's phone was flooded with interview requests from local news stations, national outlets, podcast hosts. She turned them all down. One interview was enough, but she couldn't turn down what came next. At 3:47 p.m. on Friday afternoon, a woman walked into the Magnolia room with tears streaming down her face. Grace was at the hostess stand when she saw her. Mid-30s Hispanic wearing a server's uniform from another restaurant. "Are you Grace Williams?" the woman asked. Grace nodded. "Yes. Can I help you?" The woman broke down completely, started sobbing so hard she couldn't speak. Grace guided her to a quiet corner of the restaurant, gave her tissues, waited for her to calm down. "I'm sorry," the woman finally said. "I'm so sorry. I just read the article and I had to come. It's okay. Take your time." The woman wiped her eyes. "My name is Maria Gonzalez. I work at a restaurant in Midtown. My manager has been stealing my tips for 2 years. Grace felt her heart clench. "Tell me." Maria's story poured out. The same pattern Victor had used. Controlling the tip pool, cutting hours for anyone who complained, targeting Hispanic workers who were afraid to speak up because of immigration concerns. "I didn't know what to do," Maria said. "I didn't think anyone would believe me, but then I read your story and I thought maybe someone would care." Grace took Maria's hands in hers. "Someone does care. I care. What do I do?" Grace looked at this woman, this stranger, who had walked into her restaurant seeking help, and she saw herself, saw the fear, the desperation, the hope. First, Grace said firmly, "You document everything, every shift, every tip you receive versus every tip you should receive. Write it all down. Then what? Then you call this number." Grace pulled out Patricia Okonkwo's business card. "She's an employment lawyer, one of the best in Atlanta. She'll know what to do." Maria stared at the card. "I can't afford a lawyer. You don't have to. Patricia works on contingency for wage theft cases. If you win, she takes a percentage. If you lose, you owe nothing." Maria's eyes filled with fresh tears. "Why are you helping me? You don't even know me." Grace smiled. "Because everyone who walks through that door matters. That's what I believe. That's what I'll always believe." Maria hugged her, held on tight, whispered thank you over and over, and Grace realized that her story wasn't just about her own justice anymore. It was about showing others that justice was possible. Friday evening, Grace finally went home. Not to her old apartment. That place was still a crime scene sealed off by police tape while investigators documented Victor's intended attack. Home was Marcus's guest room now. Had been for 3 days. Isaiah was waiting for her when she walked through the door. "Mama," he ran to her, wrapped his arms around her waist. "I watched the news. They talked about you." Grace knelt down to his level. "You saw that Grandma showed me on her phone. She said you're a hero." Grace felt tears threatening again. "I'm not a hero, baby. I'm just your mama." Isaiah shook his head solemnly. "No, you're a hero, like Wonder Woman, but better, because you're real." Grace laughed through her tears and hugged him tight. Marcus stood in the doorway, watching them. His expression was soft, almost tender. "He's right, you know," Marcus said when Isaiah finally released his mother. "You are a hero." Grace stood up, wiping her eyes. "I'm just someone who refused to give up. That's exactly what a hero is." They stood there for a moment looking at each other. Something passed between them. Something unspoken but powerful. Isaiah broke the tension. "Mr. Marcus, can we order pizza for dinner?" "Please," Marcus laughed. "Anything you want, buddy. You earned it. Can I get pepperoni and sausage? You can get anything on the menu." Isaiah pumped his fist in the air. Best day ever. He ran off to find Mama Ruth and share the good news. Grace and Marcus were alone. "Thank you," Grace said softly, "for everything you've done for him, for us." Marcus stepped closer. "You don't have to keep thanking me, Grace. I know, but I want you to understand." She looked up at him. "I've been alone for 6 years, raising Isaiah by myself, fighting every battle by myself. I forgot what it felt like to have someone in my corner. You're not alone anymore. I know." Grace smiled, and that scares me more than Victor ever did. Marcus raised an eyebrow. "Why?" "Because, Victor, I knew how to fight." "This," she gestured between them. "I don't know what to do with this." "Neither do I," Marcus admitted. "My wife died 6 years ago. I've been alone ever since, running from the grief, burying myself in work." What changed? Marcus looked at her with those warm brown eyes. You changed everything." Grace felt her heart racing. "I don't know if I'm ready for this. Neither do I. But I know I don't want to go back to being alone." Grace thought about her father, about what he would say if he were here. He would say that love isn't something you're ever ready for. It's something that finds you when you need it most. "Okay," she whispered. Okay, I'll try. We'll try. Together." Marcus smiled. The first real smile she had seen from him since this whole thing began. Together, he agreed. Saturday morning brought a development nobody expected. Grace's phone rang at 7:23 a.m. Patricia Okonkwo. "Grace?" "I have news. Victor Kane wants to make a deal." Grace sat up in bed, instantly awake. "What kind of deal?" "He's willing to plead guilty to all charges in exchange for a reduced sentence." "But there's a condition." "What condition?" "He wants to speak to you. In person. Before he signs." Grace felt ice in her veins. "No, absolutely not. I told his lawyer the same thing. But Victor insists. He says he has something to tell you. Something important. I don't care what he has to say." Patricia was quiet for a moment. "Grace? I understand your reaction, but I think you should consider it." "Why?" "Because this man nearly killed you. Nearly burned down your home with your son inside. If you can look him in the eye and show him that you're not afraid, that you're stronger than him, that might be the closure you need." Grace thought about it. Really thought about it. Victor had been her tormentor for 18 months. Had stolen her money, cut her hours, humiliated her, threatened her son. He had tried to destroy her life in every way possible, and she was still standing. "Fine," she said. "I'll meet him." Grace drove to the Fulton County Jail at 10:00 a.m. Marcus wanted to come with her. She told him no. This was something she had to do alone. The visiting room was cold, sterile, impersonal. Plastic chairs bolted to the floor, a thick glass partition separating visitors from inmates. Armed guards at every door. Grace sat down at the partition and waited. 3 minutes later, Victor Kane was brought in. He looked different. Smaller, somehow. The arrogance that had defined him was gone. His shoulders were slumped. His eyes were hollow. He looked like a man who had finally seen the consequences of his choices. He sat down across from her. They stared at each other through the glass. Grace spoke first. "You wanted to see me. I'm here." Victor was quiet for a long moment. Then he spoke. "I wanted to apologize." Grace blinked. She hadn't expected that. "I know it doesn't mean anything," Victor continued. "I know I can't take back what I did. But I wanted you to hear it from me. I'm sorry." Grace studied his face, looking for manipulation, looking for the con. But all she saw was exhaustion and defeat. "Why did you do it?" she asked. "The stealing. The threats." Why? Victor laughed bitterly. "Because I could. Because nobody was watching. Because I convinced myself I deserved it. Deserved what? Everything. The money. The power. The control." Victor's voice cracked. "I grew up with nothing, Grace. Watched my mother work 3 jobs and still couldn't keep the lights on. I swore I would never be poor again. Never be powerless again. So you took it from people who had even less?" "Yes." Victor met her eyes. "And I told myself it didn't matter because they weren't like me. They weren't going anywhere. They'd never amount to anything." Grace felt something shift inside her. Not forgiveness, not yet. Maybe not ever. But understanding. "I grew up with nothing too," she said quietly. "My father worked himself to death trying to give us a better life. My mother cleaned houses for white families who never learned her name." Victor looked surprised. "I didn't know that." "You never asked. You never saw me as a person, just someone to exploit." "I know." Victor's voice was barely a whisper. "I know that now." Grace leaned forward. "I want you to understand something, Victor. I'm not here because I forgive you. I'm not here because I feel sorry for you. I'm here because I needed to see you like this. Powerless. Defeated. The way you made me feel for 18 months. Victor flinched. "Fair enough. But I also want you to know something else. Grace's voice hardened. What you did to me made me stronger. Every tip you stole, every hour you cut, every threat you made, it all made me fight harder. And now I'm standing and you're sitting in that chair? Victor nodded slowly. I know. And for what it's worth, I think you're going to do great things, Grace. Better things than I ever could. Grace stood up. Goodbye, Victor. Goodbye, Grace. She turned and walked out of the visiting room. Didn't look back, and she felt something she hadn't felt in 18 months. Free. She felt free. Marcus was waiting in the parking lot. He had come anyway. Of course he had. Grace walked toward him, and without a word he wrapped his arms around her. How was it, he asked. Necessary, she said. And final. Are you okay? Grace pulled back and looked at him. I'm better than okay. I'm ready. Ready for what? Ready to move forward. Ready to build something new. Ready to stop being defined by what Victor did to me. Marcus smiled. Then let's do it. Together. They drove back to the restaurant. The lunch rush was just starting. Grace changed into her work clothes and walked onto the floor. Denise was already there handling 3 tables with practiced ease. Tyler was actually being helpful for once. Jennifer was training a new hire explaining the POS system with patience and care. The staff of the Magnolia Room was functioning, thriving even, without Victor's toxic presence poisoning everything. Grace took her position near the hostess stand and surveyed her domain. A couple walked in. Mid-60s, well-dressed. Nervous? First-time visitors. Welcome to the Magnolia Room, Grace said with a warm smile. Table for 2? The woman nodded. Yes, please. We read about you in the paper. We wanted to see the restaurant for ourselves. Grace felt a swell of pride. Well, you came to the right place. Let me show you to our best table. She led them to the window, the table with the best view. The same table she had once been punished for giving to customers who didn't look like they belonged. Your server will be right with you. Grace handed them menus. And if there's anything I can do to make your experience better, please don't hesitate to ask. The woman touched Grace's hand. Thank you for everything you did, for standing up. Grace smiled. That's what we do here. We stand up for each other. She walked back to the hostess stand, passing Marcus, who was helping bus a table. Their eyes met. He smiled. She smiled back. And for the first time in years, Grace Williams felt like she was exactly where she was supposed to be. The afternoon passed in a blur of activity, but it was the good kind of chaos, the kind that meant success. At 4:30 p.m., Grace's phone buzzed. A text from Patricia. Victor signed the deal, pleading guilty to all charges, sentencing in 2 weeks, looking at 3 to 5 years. Grace stared at the message. 3 to 5 years. Victor Kane was going to prison. She forwarded the text to Marcus. He looked up from across the restaurant, caught her eye, nodded. It was over. Really, truly over. At 5:00 p.m., Mama Ruth arrived with Isaiah. The boy ran straight to Grace and threw his arms around her. Mama Grandma said Victor is going to jail forever, Grace laughed. Not forever, baby, but for a long time. Good. Isaiah's face was serious. He was mean to you. Mean people should go to jail. Grace knelt down to his level. You know what, baby? Sometimes mean people just need someone to show them a better way. But when they hurt others, they have to face consequences. Like when I hit Tommy at school and had to go to the principal, Grace smiled. Exactly like that, but bigger consequences for bigger wrongs. Isaiah nodded solemnly. I'm glad you're not mean, Mama. I try not to be baby. I try every single day. The dinner rush was the busiest the Magnolia Room had ever seen. Every table was full. The wait was over an hour. Customers were actually happy to wait, excited to be part of the story, eager to support the restaurant that had become a symbol of standing up against injustice. Grace worked the floor until 10:00 p.m. Her feet were screaming. Her back ached. But she didn't care. When the last customer finally left and the doors were locked, the staff gathered in the dining room. Marcus stood at the front. I want to thank everyone for today. This was the best day in the history of the Magnolia Room, and it wouldn't have happened without each and every one of you. Applause rippled through the room. But I especially finally want to thank someone who made all of this possible. Marcus looked at Grace. Someone who showed me what courage really looks like. Someone who reminded me why my father built this company in the first place. Grace felt heat rising to her cheeks. Marcus, you don't have to. Yes, I do. Marcus walked toward her. Grace Williams, you changed my life. You changed this restaurant. You changed everyone in this room. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. The room went completely silent. Grace's heart stopped. What are you doing? Marcus opened the box. Inside was a key, a simple brass key on a silver chain. This is the key to the Magnolia Room, he said. I want you to have it. Grace stared at the key. I don't understand. I'm making you a partner, Grace, not just an employee. A true partner. Equal say in every decision. Equal share in every profit. Equal ownership of everything we build together. Tears streamed down Grace's face. Marcus, I can't. Yes, you can. Marcus took the key from the box and placed it in her hand. You've earned this, not because I gave it to you, because you fought for it, every single day. Grace looked at the key in her palm. Then she looked at Marcus. Then she looked at the staff, her family, all of them watching with tears in their eyes. Thank you, she whispered. Thank you. Marcus smiled. Don't thank me. Just promise me you'll never stop being exactly who you are. I promise. The room erupted in applause. Denise was crying. Tyler was cheering. Even the normally stoic kitchen staff was emotional, and Grace stood in the center of it all holding a key that represented everything she had ever wanted. Security, dignity, family, hope. Later that night, after everyone had gone home, Grace sat alone in the empty restaurant. The key was still in her hand. She kept turning it over, feeling its weight, its realness. The door opened. Marcus walked in. I thought you went home, Grace said. I came back, wanted to make sure you were okay. Grace smiled. I'm better than okay. I'm overwhelmed. In a good way. Marcus sat down across from her. I meant what I said, Grace. You're my partner now. In everything. Grace looked at him. What does everything mean? Marcus was quiet for a moment. Then he reached across the table and took her hand. It means I want to build something with you, not just a restaurant, a life. Grace felt her heart racing. That's a big statement. I know, and I know it's soon. And I know we both have baggage and scars and reasons to be afraid. He squeezed her hand. But when I watched you in that visiting room today, when I saw you face down the man who tried to destroy you, I realized something. What? That I don't want to be afraid anymore. I don't want to be alone anymore. I want to be with someone who makes me better, and that someone is you. Grace stared at him. This man, this stranger, who had become her employer, her protector, her partner, her friend, this man who was looking at her like she was the answer to a prayer he had stopped saying years ago. I'm scared, she admitted. So am I. What if it doesn't work? What if it does? Grace laughed softly. You're very optimistic for a businessman, and you're very cautious for a hero. They sat there for a long moment, holding hands across the table, feeling the weight of everything that had happened and everything that was about to begin. Finally, Grace spoke. Okay, I'll try. We'll try. But slowly. I have a son to think about, a life to rebuild, I know, and I'll wait, however long it takes. Grace smiled. You might be waiting a while. Marcus smiled back. You're worth waiting for. They sat in the empty restaurant until midnight, talking about everything and nothing, about their fathers, about their dreams, about the future they might build together. And when Grace finally went home that night, she realized something. Home wasn't a place anymore. It was a feeling. And for the first time in 6 years, she had finally found it. 3 months passed like a dream Grace was afraid to wake from. The Magnolia Room had become something none of them expected. Not just a restaurant anymore. A symbol, a movement, a place where people came not just for the food, but for the feeling of being seen, valued, and respected. The morning of March 15th started like any other. Grace arrived at 6:00 a.m. to review the day's schedule and inventory reports. She had learned more about restaurant management in 3 months than she had in 12 years of serving. The learning curve was steep, but she attacked it with the same determination she had brought to everything else in her life. Her phone buzzed at 6:47 a.m. A text from Marcus. Check your email. Something important. Grace opened her laptop and pulled up her inbox. The subject line made her heart stop. Department of Labor Investigation, complete final report. She clicked it open with trembling fingers. The document was 23 pages long, dense with legal language and statistical analysis, but the summary at the top told her everything she needed to know. Investigation into wage theft practices at the Magnolia Room has concluded. Total documented theft, $47,832 over an 18-month period. All affected employees have been identified and compensated. Criminal charges against Victor Kane have been upheld. Civil penalties against the establishment have been waived due to the owner's cooperation and implementation of corrective measures. Grace read it 3 times. $47,000. Victor had stolen $47,000 from his own colleagues, and now finally, officially, it was over. Her phone rang. Marcus. Did you see it? His voice was excited, relieved. I saw it. Grace's voice cracked. It's really over. It's really over. We won, Grace. You won. We won together. There was a pause on the line, something heavy with meaning. I'm coming in early, Marcus said. There's something I need to tell you. In person. Grace's heart rate spiked. Is everything okay? Everything is more than okay. Just wait for me. He hung up before she could ask more questions. Grace stared at her phone, her mind racing with possibilities. What did he need to tell her? Why in person? Why did his voice sound so strange? She tried to focus on work, but the questions kept circling in her head. Marcus arrived at 7:30 a.m. He walked through the front door carrying a folder, his expression unreadable. Grace met him in the dining room, her anxiety building with every step. What's going on? She asked. You're scaring me. Marcus smiled. Don't be scared. Come. Sit. They sat at a table near the window. The same table where Grace had once been punished for giving to the wrong kind of customers. Marcus opened the folder and slid a document across to her. Grace looked at it, read the first few lines, then looked up at Marcus in complete shock. This is a deed. Yes. A deed for what? For the building next door. Marcus's eyes were shining. I bought it last week. We're expanding. Grace couldn't process what she was hearing. Expanding, Marcus leaned forward. Grace, the last 3 months have been the most profitable in company history. We've had to turn away customers every night. The demand is there. The momentum is there. It's time to grow. But expanding is expensive. Risky. I know. That's why I'm not doing it alone. Grace frowned. What do you mean? Marcus pulled out another document. A contract. I want you to be my full partner in the expansion. Not just this restaurant. The new one, too. Equal ownership. Equal decision-making. Equal everything. Grace stared at the contract. Her name was already printed on the signature line. Grace Williams, co-owner. Marcus, this is too much. I can't accept this. You're not accepting anything. You're earning it. Marcus's voice was firm. You saved this restaurant, Grace. You rebuilt the staff. You created a culture that attracts customers from all over the city. Without you, none of this would be possible. But I was just a waitress 3 months ago, and now you're the best manager I've ever worked with. Marcus reached across the table and took her hand. Grace? I'm not doing this out of charity or gratitude. I'm doing this because it's good business. You're the best investment I've ever made. Grace felt tears streaming down her face. She looked at the contract at their joined hands at this man who had changed her entire life. What would the new restaurant be called? She asked. Marcus smiled. I was hoping you could help me with that. Grace thought about it. Thought about her father. About Big Daddy's Kitchen, the place where Marcus's father had built his legacy. About the values they both shared. What about Williams and Jefferson? She said slowly. A partnership. In the name and in reality. Marcus's smile widened. I love it. Grace picked up the pen. Her hand was trembling. This is real, she said. This is really happening. It's real, Grace. Everything is real. She signed her name on the line. Grace Williams, co-owner. And just like that, her entire life changed again. The news of the expansion spread through the staff within hours. Denise found Grace in the office at 11:00 a.m., her eyes wide with excitement. Is it true we're opening a second location? Grace nodded, still processing it herself. It's true, and you're going to be the owner-co-owner, with Marcus. Denise threw her arms around Grace. Oh my God, this is amazing. You deserve this so much. Grace hugged her back. Thank you, but I'm going to need help. Lots of help. Whatever you need. I'm here. Grace pulled back and looked at her friend. Actually, there's something I wanted to ask you. Anything. I want you to be the general manager of the new location. Denise's jaw dropped. What? You've been here longer than almost anyone. You know the culture, the standards, the way we treat people. I can't think of anyone better to run the new place. Grace, I can't. I don't have experience. I've never managed anything. Neither did I 3 months ago. Grace smiled. But someone believed in me. Now I'm believing in you. Denise burst into tears. Happy tears, but tears nonetheless. I won't let you down, she whispered. I know you won't. The lunch rush was intense, but Grace moved through it with a new energy. Every table she checked on every problem she solved, every smile she gave. It all meant something different now. She wasn't just working for someone else anymore. She was building something of her own. At 2:30 p.m., her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Congratulations on the expansion. I always knew you'd make something of yourself. I'm sorry I wasn't man enough to be there for you and Isaiah. I hope one day you can forgive me. Derek Grace stared at the message. Derek, Isaiah's father, the man who had walked out when Isaiah was 2 years old because he couldn't handle having a sick child. She hadn't heard from him in 6 years. Not a call, not a letter, not a single birthday card for his son. And now suddenly he was reaching out. Grace's first instinct was to delete the message, to ignore him the way he had ignored them for 6 years. But something stopped her. She thought about Victor, about how she had faced him in that visiting room, about how confronting her fear had set her free. Maybe this was another fear she needed to face. She typed a response. "Thank you for reaching out. Forgiveness takes time, but I'm willing to try, for Isaiah's sake." She hit send before she could change her mind. The response came immediately. "Can I meet him?" "Just once I've changed Grace. I want to be better." Grace stared at the message. Her heart was pounding. This was a decision she couldn't make alone. That evening, Grace sat down with Isaiah at the kitchen table. Mama Ruth was in the living room close enough to listen, but giving them privacy. Baby Grace began carefully. "I need to talk to you about something important." Isaiah looked up from his coloring book. "What is it?" Mama Grace took a deep breath. "Do you remember when I told you about your daddy, about why he doesn't live with us?" Isaiah nodded slowly. "You said he went away when I was a baby because he was scared." "That's right, he was scared. But today he sent me a message." Isaiah's eyes went wide. "My daddy?" "Yes, he says he's changed. He says he wants to meet you." Isaiah was quiet for a long moment. His small face was serious, thoughtful, so much older than his 8 years. "Do you want me to meet him?" he finally asked. Grace felt tears threatening. "This isn't about what I want, baby. This is about what you want. What would make you feel safe and happy?" Isaiah looked down at his coloring book, then back at his mother. "I think I want to meet him," he said quietly, "but I'm scared." "What are you scared of?" "What if he doesn't like me?" Isaiah's voice cracked. "What if he sees how sick I am and goes away again?" Grace's heart shattered into a million pieces. She pulled her son into her arms and held him tight. "Listen to me, baby. If your daddy goes away again, that's his problem, not yours. You are perfect exactly the way you are. Your sickness doesn't make you less. It makes you stronger." "Really? Really? You have fought harder in 8 years than most people fight in their whole lives. And anyone who can't see how amazing you are doesn't deserve to know you." Isaiah sniffled. "Will you be there? When I meet him, I'll be right beside you, every second. Promise, promise?" Isaiah wiped his eyes. "Okay, I'll meet him." Grace held her son and felt something shift inside her, a door opening, a wound beginning to heal. Whatever happened next, they would face it together. Saturday morning. Derek Williams arrived at the Magnolia Room at 10:00 a.m. Grace had chosen the restaurant for the meeting deliberately. This was her territory, her safe space. If anything went wrong, she had backup. Marcus waited in the office ready to intervene if needed. Mama Ruth sat at a nearby table pretending to read a magazine, and Isaiah sat beside Grace, clutching her hand so tight his knuckles were white. The door opened. A man walked in. Grace barely recognized him. Derek had aged a decade in 6 years. His hair was graying at the temples. Lines creased his face. He was thinner than she remembered, more worn. But his eyes were the same. Isaiah's eyes. Derek stopped a few feet away, clearly uncertain. His gaze moved from Grace to Isaiah, and something broke in his expression. "He's so big," Derek whispered. "He's so big now. He's 8, Grace said evenly. "A lot can happen in 6 years. Derek flinched at the accusation in her voice, but he didn't argue. He deserved it. "Can I sit down?" he asked. Grace nodded toward the chair across from them. Derek sat. His hands were trembling. "Isaiah," he said softly, "do you know who I am?" Isaiah nodded. "You're my daddy, the one who went away." Derek's face crumpled. "Yes, I'm the one who went away. And I'm so sorry, Isaiah. More sorry than you'll ever know." "Why did you leave?" Isaiah asked. The question was simple, direct, devastating. Derek was quiet for a long moment. Tears streamed down his face. "Because I was scared," he finally said. "When the doctors told us you were sick, I didn't know how to handle it. I didn't know how to be strong enough to help you. So I ran." "That was wrong," Isaiah said. "Yes, it was the most wrong thing I've ever done. Mama says when we do wrong things, we have to make it right." Derek looked at Grace, something like hope in his eyes. "Your mama is a very wise woman." "I know." Isaiah's voice was proud. "She's a hero. She's on the news and everything." Derek nodded. I saw all of it. That's part of why I reached out. When I read what your mama did, how brave she was, I realized how much of a coward I had been. I wanted to be better, for you." Isaiah studied his father's face, the serious expression of a child deciding whether to trust. Do you promise not to leave again? Derek's voice broke. I promise. I swear on everything I have. I will never abandon you again. Pinky promised. Derek looked confused. Grace almost laughed despite herself. It's the most sacred promise, she explained. You hook your pinky fingers together. Derek extended his pinky. Isaiah looked at it for a long moment. Then slowly he reached out and hooked his small pinky around his father's. Pinky promise, Isaiah said solemnly. Pinky promise, Derek repeated. And just like that, a family began to heal. The next 3 months were a whirlwind of construction planning and growth. Williams and Jefferson opened on June 15th to a line around the block. Grace stood at the entrance greeting customers, welcoming them into the restaurant she had helped create. Her name was on the sign. Her values were in the walls. Her heart was in every detail. Denise ran the floor with the same warmth and efficiency Grace had modeled. The new staff had been trained in the culture of dignity and respect that defined everything they did. Marcus worked the opening night alongside Grace just like he had worked every important night since they met. At 9:00 p.m. when the rush finally slowed, he found her standing near the window looking out at the crowded dining room. How does it feel? He asked. Grace smiled. Like a dream I don't want to wake up from. Then don't wake up. Stay here. With me. Grace turned to look at him. In the soft light of the restaurant with the sounds of laughter and conversation around them, she felt something she had never felt before. Complete. She felt complete. Marcus, she said softly, there's something I've been wanting to tell you. What? Grace took a breath. For 6 years I told myself I didn't need anyone, that Isaiah and I were fine on our own, that letting someone in would only lead to disappointment. And now I realize I was just protecting myself from getting hurt. Grace met his eyes. But I don't want to be protected anymore. I want to be loved. Marcus stepped closer. You are loved, Grace, more than you know. Show me. Marcus leaned in and kissed her. Soft at first, then deeper. A kiss that said everything words couldn't express. When they finally pulled apart, Grace was crying. Happy tears this time. The happiest tears of her life. I love you, Marcus whispered. I love you too. They stood there holding each other as the restaurant buzzed around them. Two people who had found each other in the most unexpected way. Two people who had built something beautiful out of pain and courage and hope. 1 year later, Grace Williams stood at the podium of the Atlanta Business Coalition annual dinner. 600 people filled the ballroom. Business leaders, politicians, journalists, celebrities, all gathered to honor the most successful new restaurant group in the city, and to hear Grace speak. She looked out at the sea of faces and felt a momentary flash of panic. Public speaking had never been her strength. She was a server, a manager, a mother, not a spokesperson. But then she saw Marcus in the front row smiling at her with pride. She saw Isaiah beside him wearing a tiny suit giving her a thumbs up. She saw Mama Ruth wiping her eyes with a handkerchief. She saw Denise and Tyler and Jennifer and everyone from the Magnolia Room who had come to support her. Her family, her village, her team. Grace took a breath and began. 1.5 years ago, she said I was a waitress working double shifts at a restaurant where my manager was stealing my tips. I was a single mother trying to afford medication for my sick child. I was invisible, powerless, and afraid. The room was silent. Every eye was on her. Then one night, a man walked into my restaurant wearing a worn jacket and dusty work boots. He ordered the cheapest thing on the menu. My manager wanted to throw him out. But I saw something different. I saw a person who deserved dignity regardless of what he was wearing or how much money he had. She paused. Let the moment breathe. So I gave him a free meal. Not because I had anything to gain. Not because I knew who he really was. But because everyone who walks through the door deserves to be treated like they matter. Grace looked at Marcus. That man turned out to be the owner of the restaurant, and his name is Marcus Jefferson. A murmur rippled through the crowd. This part of the story had been reported, but hearing it from Grace herself gave it new power. Marcus went undercover because he suspected something was wrong. What he found was worse than he imagined. 18 months of wage theft. Systematic discrimination against black and immigrant workers. A culture of fear and exploitation. Grace's voice hardened. But he also found something else. He found employees who had been documenting the abuse, who had been keeping records holding on to hope that someone would eventually care enough to listen. She held up a worn manila envelope. The same envelope she had kept in her locker for so long. This envelope contains 52 pieces of paper. Napkins, receipts, scraps torn from order pads. Every page documents a shift where I was robbed. Every page was a prayer that justice would come. She set the envelope down. Justice did come. Not because I was special, not because I was lucky, but because I refused to give up, because Marcus Jefferson chose to see the truth, because good people decided to stand together against someone who was hurting them. Grace looked out at the crowd. I stand here tonight not to brag about my success. I stand here to tell you that there are millions of workers in this country being exploited right now. Stolen tips, edited time cards, unpaid overtime, $15 billion stolen from American workers every single year. She let that number sink in. Most of them don't have a Marcus Jefferson to save them. Most of them are suffering in silence, afraid to speak up, afraid to lose their jobs, afraid to fight back. Her voice rose. But I'm here to tell them that they are not alone, that their stories matter, that if they document, if they organize, if they refuse to give up, justice is possible. She looked at Marcus again. 1 year ago, I was a waitress. Today, I am a business owner, co-owner of 2 restaurants that employ 63 people, 63 families who are treated with dignity and respect, 63 paychecks that are never stolen. Grace smiled. That transformation didn't happen because of luck. It happened because someone believed in me when I had stopped believing in myself. It happened because I had the courage to keep fighting even when I wanted to give up. It happened because kindness, real kindness, changes everything, she concluded. So I want to leave you with one thought tonight. Whatever room you walk into tomorrow, whether it's a restaurant or an office or a factory, remember that everyone there matters. The CEO matters. The janitor matters. The customer matters. The server matters. Grace's voice rang with conviction. How we treat people when nobody's watching is who we really are. And if we can remember that if we can live by that, then we can build a world where no one has to hide stolen tips in an envelope labeled with their child's name. She paused. Thank you. The room exploded into applause. A standing ovation that seemed to go on forever. Grace stepped back from the podium, overwhelmed by the response. Marcus reached the stage in seconds, pulling her into his arms. I'm so proud of you, he whispered. I couldn't have done it without you. Yes, you could have. You just would have taken longer. Grace laughed through her tears. Maybe. Isaiah ran up to the stage, breaking all protocol, and threw his arms around both of them. Mama, you were amazing. You're the best speaker ever. Grace knelt down and hugged her son. Thank you, baby. Are you famous now? Grace laughed. I don't know about famous, but I think I'm happy. Is that okay? That's the best thing, Isaiah said solemnly. Happy is better than famous. When did you get so wise? Grandma says I get it from you. Grace looked up at Mama Ruth, who had finally made her way through the crowd. That boy is going to break hearts, Mama Ruth said, wiping her eyes. Just like his mama. Grace stood and embraced her mother. Thank you for everything, for never giving up on me. Baby girl, I never doubted you for a second. The reception lasted until midnight. Grace shook hundreds of hands, accepted countless congratulations posed for pictures with people she had never met. But through it all, she kept coming back to the same 3 people. Marcus, Isaiah, Mama Ruth, her family, her home, her heart. At 12:30 a.m., they finally left the ballroom. Marcus drove them home in his car. Isaiah fell asleep in the back seat, his head on Mama Ruth's shoulder. Grace sat in the passenger seat watching the city lights pass by, thinking about everything that had happened in the last 18 months. A year and a half ago, she had been invisible. Now she was on television giving speeches, owning restaurants. But more than that, she was loved. Truly, deeply, completely loved. Marcus reached over and took her hand. Penny, for your thoughts. Grace smiled. I was just thinking about how different my life is now. Good, different, the best different. Marcus squeezed her hand. There's something I've been wanting to ask you. Grace's heart rate spiked. What? Marcus pulled the car over to the side of the road, turned off the engine. Grace, he said, turning to face her. When I walked into that restaurant 18 months ago, I thought I was going undercover to catch a thief. I had no idea I was about to meet the person who would change my entire life. Marcus. Grace breathed. You showed me what courage looks like, what kindness looks like, what real love looks like. You made me a better person, a better businessman, a better man. He reached into his pocket. Grace's breath caught in her throat. Marcus pulled out a small velvet box, opened it. Inside was a ring, a beautiful diamond ring that caught the streetlight and sparkled like hope. Grace Williams. Marcus said, his voice thick with emotion, Will you marry me? Grace stared at the ring. Then at Marcus, then back at the ring. In the back seat, Mama Ruth was pretending to be asleep but failing miserably. Her shoulders were shaking with silent sobs. Isaiah, apparently not as asleep as he seemed, sat up and said, Say yes, Mama. Say yes. Grace laughed through her tears. This was not how she had imagined this moment. In a car on the side of the road, with her son cheering and her mother crying in the back seat, it was perfect. Yes, she said. Yes, Marcus. 1,000 times yes. Marcus slid the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly. Then he kissed her, and Grace felt everything she had ever wanted falling into place. Isaiah cheered. Mama Ruth sobbed. And somewhere up in heaven, Grace knew her father was smiling. The wedding took place 6 months later. They held it at the Magnolia Room, transformed for one day into a chapel of flowers and candlelight. Isaiah was the ring bearer. Denise was the maid of honor. Mama Ruth walked Grace down the aisle, filling in for the father who couldn't be there. And in the front row, looking nervous but proud, sat Derek Williams. He had kept his promise. Every week for 6 months he had shown up. Baseball games, school plays, doctor appointments. He was learning to be a father one day at a time. Grace wore a simple white dress. No designer label, no expensive jewelry. Just grace and dignity and love. Marcus wore a suit, but underneath the jacket, against his heart, he wore a small patch of fabric from his father's old work jacket. A piece of Big Daddy present on the most important day of his son's life. When the minister asked if anyone objected, the room was silent. When Marcus said, "I do," his voice was strong and certain. When Grace said, "I do," she meant it with every fiber of her being. They exchanged rings, they exchanged vows, they exchanged a kiss that sealed their promise. And when the minister pronounced them husband and wife, the room erupted in joy. The reception lasted until dawn. Grace danced with Marcus, danced with Isaiah, danced with Mama Ruth, danced with Derek awkwardly at first, then with something approaching forgiveness. Denise gave a toast that made everyone cry. Tyler gave a toast that made everyone laugh. Even the cooks came out of the kitchen to celebrate. At 3:00 a.m., Grace stepped outside for a moment of quiet. The Atlanta skyline glittered in the distance. The air was cool and fresh. The stars were barely visible through the city lights, but Grace could see them anyway. Marcus found her there, leaning against the railing, looking up at the sky. "Escaping your own party?" he asked. "Just thinking." "About what?" "About my daddy." Grace's voice was soft. "He always said the measure of a person is how they treat people who can't do anything for them. I remember Marcus said, 'You told me that the night we met. I think about it every day. Every decision I make, I ask myself, what would Daddy say? What would he say about all this?'" Grace smiled. "He'd say I did good. He'd say he was proud. He'd say the Lord works in mysterious ways." Marcus wrapped his arms around her from behind. "What do you say?" Grace leaned back into his embrace. "I say that 18 months ago I gave a free meal to a stranger because I thought he was hungry. I didn't know it would change my life. I didn't know he was the owner of the restaurant. I didn't know that one act of kindness would lead to justice, to partnership, to love." She turned to face him. "But I'd do it again, 1,000 times. Because that's who I am. That's who my daddy raised me to be. Someone who treats every person like they matter. Because they do." Marcus kissed her forehead. "And that's why I love you." They stood there together, watching the city wake up around them. Two people who had found each other against all odds. Two people who had built something beautiful out of pain and courage and hope. The sun rose over Atlanta, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink and promise. "Grace." "Williams." Jefferson took her husband's hand and smiled. "Let's go home," she said. And they did. 5 years later, Grace stood in front of a crowd of 3,000 people at the National Labor Rights Conference in Washington, D.C. Behind her, a banner read, "Williams and Jefferson Foundation Fighting Wage Theft, Building Dignity." The foundation she and Marcus had created now operated in 12 states. They had helped recover over $40 million in stolen wages. They had trained thousands of workers to document abuse and fight back. They had changed laws in 6 states, making wage theft a felony instead of a misdemeanor. But more than that, they had changed minds. Changed hearts. Changed the way people thought about the invisible workers who kept the world running. Grace looked out at the crowd. Workers, activists, lawyers, journalists. People who believed that everyone deserved dignity. People who were willing to fight for it. She thought about her journey. From waitress to manager to owner to advocate. From invisible to seen. From powerless to powerful. And she thought about the moment that started it all. A stranger in a worn jacket. A free meal offered in kindness. A simple act that changed everything. Grace leaned into the microphone. "Every person in this room has the power to change a life," she said. Not through grand gestures or political movements, through simple kindness, through seeing people who feel invisible, through treating everyone like they matter. She paused. Because they do. Every worker matters. Every family matters. Every story matters. And when we forget that when we let people be exploited and abused, we lose something essential about who we are as a society, her voice rose with conviction. I stand here today as proof that one act of kindness can change everything. I gave a stranger a free meal because I thought he needed it. I didn't know it would lead to this. I didn't know it would lead to justice, to love, to standing in front of thousands of people telling my story. Grace smiled. But I know this, I would do it again. Every time. Because kindness isn't weakness. It's the strongest thing we have. And when we use it, when we really commit to treating people with dignity, we can build a world where no one has to hide their stolen wages in an envelope labeled with their child's name. She looked out at the crowd one final time. My father used to say the measure of a person is how they treat people who can't do anything for them. I've tried to live by that every day of my life. And I'm asking you to do the same. Grace stepped back from the podium. Because everyone who walks through the door matters. Everyone who shows up to work matters. Everyone who is struggling to make ends meet matters. Her voice rang with certainty, with faith, with unshakable conviction. And when we remember that when we truly believe it and act on it, we don't just change individual lives. We change the world. The crowd rose to their feet. 3,000 people applauding, cheering, believing. Grace looked out at them and felt her father's presence beside her. Felt Marcus's love behind her. Felt Isaiah's future ahead of her. And she knew with absolute certainty that everything she had been through, every stolen tip and cut shift and moment of despair had led her exactly where she was supposed to be. Not just successful, not just wealthy, not just famous, but kind. Truly, deeply, powerfully kind. And that in the end was the only thing that mattered.